Hello, everybody. Glad that you all are here tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. I am looking forward to it. So glad that you all are here. Let's chat.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Just yet another great late night conversation. So yeah, the way these conversations work, first I give my opening remarks. Then from there, we do the roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the program, by all means, send me a Rumble rant or a super chat. Those are the two ways that one can send questions. Super chats come via Cash App, unfortunately, because we can't have super chats here on YouTube. YouTube is not being kind to us because of our differences about U.S. foreign policy. But you can Cash App me at CalebMoppin22 on Cash App, or you can send a Rumble rant. On Rumble, that's pretty straightforward. Just, use your Rumble account, send me a Rumble rant. If not, you can send me CalebMoppin22 on Cash App, send a question. It is your questions that make the second half of the show what it is. So please send them. Get me talking in the second half of our show. Now, announcements. The big announcement is the Center for Political Innovation National Convention is happening. And everything is lining up. It's going to be good. It's going to be great. Angela McCurdle of the Libertarian Party is speaking. Scott Ritter, the great anti-imperialist critic of U.S. foreign policy, arms control activist, he's going to be speaking. There's a number of people. Syed Husseini, the important Iranian-American voice, he's going to be speaking. We're going to hear from Keith Preston from attackthesystem.com. We're going to hear from Jeff Young, the founder of the Kentucky Party, anti-war voice, frequent runner for office in the state of Kentucky. We are going to hear from many different CPI members. We're going to hear from David Fox, the great labor activist from Australia, who's going to be there. It's going to be quite a shindig, quite a gathering. You don't want to miss it, and we want you there. So please be there. We're filling up that auditorium. Shout out to my CPI brothers and sisters in Chicago who are at this very moment doing outreach in Chicago, and they're going to be out in the hot sun at July 4th events doing outreach all weekend. And I take my hat off to them. And Noah, who's there from Boston, who drove from Boston, and he's there helping out. And, we have a good group of people in CPI. We really, really do. And there's LA people coming into town. And we got people from New York coming. And, oh, man, I am really excited to get myself to Chicago next week and start our 7-day program and start getting everything in order for this convention. It is going to be very, 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 very awesome. It's going to be great. And we need you there. And, shout out to everyone who's coming, even people who have decided to come last minute. Hey, that's fine. I will say this. If you cannot make it, if you can't make it, please send us a donation because it's going to be a tight squeeze, Cash flow. They talk about cash flow. It's not an issue of having the money. It's about having the money in the right place at the right time. So donate. Please send a donation. GoFundMe. I got a link here. We could really use some economic relief when it comes to this. We've got to do some car rentals, and we've got to hotel rooms for speakers, and we got, a sound team and video production, and it all adds up. So yeah, if you could send a donation, you would make my day. That would make my life a lot easier, but we'd rather you come. If it's a question of sending a donation or come, just come. But if you can throw us a donation, shout out. The other night I said, hey, can anyone send $5, $20? People did. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It was very, very well appreciated, and it's going to go to good use. So thank you. I'm going to be paying for this convention for a couple months down the road, but it looks like everything is going to go smoothly, and a lot of people have contributed a lot. And thank you to those who gave big contributions. And you know who you are. One individual in particular, he knows who he is. He gave a very large contribution, and that really helped. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And there's other people who have stepped up to the plate, and we thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, everybody, right? And thank you to everyone who's going to be there. Thank you to everyone who's promoting it. Thank you to everyone who's made it a possibility. I am so excited about July 12th. And if you want to meet all the amazing people that are in this chat, that are part of these streams, if you want to meet this community in real life, in the flesh, if you want to feel the joy of being with revolutionary organizers, if you want to see Scott Ritter, if you want to see Angela McCurdle, if you want to see Jeff Young, if you want to see David Fox, you got to be there. You just got to be there, right? You just got to be there. You got to be there. So be there. That is my request. Be there, be there, be there. See you on July 12th. One other announcement that we have a new book that has been published thanks to our own member, Penny Arcos, the leader of CPI Minnesota. She put together a couple articles, and we compiled them into this book, Africa's Flame, The Rise of Ibrahim Traoré. This is the latest Center for Political Innovation book, and we're going to have it on display at the convention. So if you're coming to the convention, you can pick one up there, or you can buy it. It's up on Amazon, right? Just like everything else, right? So if you want to buy the book on Amazon, go ahead and do that. Or if you want to just come to Chicago and get one, Ibrahim Traoré, he is the future of Africa. And we had a small demonstration in Chicago to support him. And, it exploded across the internet, and it's been on TV all over the African continent. It's been on like 6 or 7 different YouTube channels at this point. Sometimes they get things wrong. They think it was in New York. They think everyone who participated was white. But hey, it really made a difference. Ibrahim Traoré is the future of Africa. We're really glad that Penny, she follows Burkina Faso very closely. She listens every day to the Burkina Faso news and is keeping up on everything going on. And she, put out this great book. So get yourself a copy. If you want to buy it on Amazon, you can buy it on Amazon, or you just come to the convention and get one. Great, great stuff. So this is the kind of leader that we need. Long live Ibrahim Traoré. Now, we are going to start moving on with our live stream. So like we always do, we follow the 3-part format. First, my opening remarks, then the roll call, and then I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if you've got something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, send me a Cash App, Caleb Maupin 22, or you can send me a super chat. All right, you can send me a Rumble rant on the Rumble, but Cash App me with your question, or super chat me, or Rumble rant me. But please send questions for the second half of the show. That's all. So anyway, glad you're all here. Glad that you are all here, and we're just going to jump into latest world events. So the big news today is that the BBB, the triple B, the big beautiful bill has passed. And it kind of sucks. The big beautiful bill is not awesome, right? It's not awesome in a number of ways. The main criticism of the big beautiful bill, which I 100% agree with, is that it will strip 17 million Americans of their Medicare coverage. Now, for those of you that are in countries that perhaps treat their citizens more decently than we treat our citizens in America, Medicare is a program through which low-income people in America can get their health insurance subsidized by the government. it's hard to get on Medicare. A lot of people make just enough money to not be on it. You have to be almost making nothing. You have to be really, really, really low income in order to get Medicare. But now 17 million of those people that are already low income enough to get Medicare are going to lose it because of the big, beautiful bill. And that is a disaster. That is absolutely disastrous. And there's a lot of other big problems with the big, beautiful bill. One of them is that it expands military spending at a time we're already spending so much on our military in the United States as our infrastructure is falling apart. More money is going to the military. It beefs up immigration customs enforcement. ICE, it greatly expands their budget and their ability to target people and deport people. And it's shitty. I mean, the big, beautiful bill is shitty. This is awful. It's not good. Right. And it would help if the Democrats, were fighting it on the basis of opposing austerity and class warfare, but they won't do that. No. The Democrats are opposing it on the grounds that deporting undocumented immigrants is racist, which is like not an argument. Right. I am opposed to what ICE is doing because I believe it is making all the problems of mass migration worse, but just calling people big fat racists, that's not going to convince anyone to oppose it, right? The people that believe immigrants are taking their jobs, the people who believe that immigrants are the source of violence and crime in America, if you go, you're a big fat racist, none of them change their minds. And the Democrats can't figure this out. They really can't figure this out, but nobody, and honestly, they're not racist. They're just wrong, right? They're not even wrong in what they're observing. They're wrong in the solution. Is it true that the flow of mass migration to the United States is driving wages down? Absolutely. Is it true that criminal organizations flourish among undocumented workers? Absolutely. It just happens that the ICE raids make all of that worse. Because, one thing is that the reason immigrant workers get paid low wages is because they don't have legal protections on the job. It is not legal to pay an undocumented worker less than minimum wage. U.S. law is that all workers, no matter what, all employees must be paid minimum wage. However, immigrants don't get paid minimum wage because they're happy to get the job and they don't want to get deported and they don't speak up about it. Well, how do you make sure immigrants are terrified to speak up about, getting paid less than minimum wage? You make sure they're terrified of getting deported. You push them into the shadows where they have to apply for work in secret, where the employer does everything completely off the books. Well, of course, then under those circumstances, of course, at that point, the immigrant community is going to work for lower wages. And on top of that, the gangs, the criminal organizations, if you make immigrant communities terrified of deportation, if you have, doors being kicked down and, children being separated from their parents, if those kinds of things happen, well, immigrant communities are definitely not going to cooperate with the police against MS-13. And they're definitely not going to call the police if there's a criminal group in their neighborhood. And they're not going to feel safe, and they're going to turn to groups like that for protection, to give them false ID, to smuggle them into the country, to do all that. The ICE stuff is going to make everything worse. The ICE thing is really just feeding the prison industrial complex, right? Because it's a business, locking up immigrants, building huge jails like they're building Alcatraz, Alligator, or whatever they're calling it. All of this just makes profit for military corporations that supply the weaponry and the gear, and this makes profit for the prison industrial complex, and it strips away everyone's rights. Because if there's a group of people, which happens to be millions and millions of people, that's there's millions and millions and millions of undocumented people in this country, and if you make a group of people that the government has license to monitor and track, that enables them to monitor and track everybody. So, it's not that we don't acknowledge the problems of mass migration, which are rooted in the global economic crisis. It's not that we don't think anything should be done about it, but expanding ICE and giving ICE the ability to violate rule of law, et cetera, that's not helping. It's not helping at all. And ICE is doing things that are blatantly illegal. There are citizens who are being grabbed by ICE. How is that legal? right? ICE is supposed to be enforcing immigration law. If someone's in the country legally, they have a green card or they have their citizenship, why would ICE be arresting them? There's things going on that are awful and unconstitutional. And so I'm not at all thrilled to see ICE have their budget vastly expanded and to see that their operations will be expanding. Just like I'm not thrilled to see military spending go up, just like I'm not thrilled to see cuts in Medicare, right? The big, beautiful bill is a big, beautiful disaster. It's not good for America in any way. It's going to hurt our country. It's going to hurt our communities. We already don't have proper funding for our bridges and highways. We already don't have proper funding for our infrastructure. We don't, our power plants are falling apart, and this is a disaster. It's a disaster. And while I'm here talking about this being a disaster, we might as well just talk about one big problem that we face. Folks, I am not a libertarian, at least not in the 21st century American sense. The word libertarian, it's an adjective originally. It meant that a person, if someone's politics are libertarian, they're liberatory, they're advocating freedom, right? That's what the term began as, right? It was just similar to if someone's radical, if someone's, bold, right? If someone's his politics are libertarian, meaning that he's advocating freedom, right? Whereas if someone's politics are authoritarian, right, they're less in favor of freedom. And in the 1800s, the word libertarian applied to communists and socialists and anarchists. It was a term for leftists in general. It just meant that you were part of that movement that came out of the French Revolution or whatever. So, in the 1800s, a guy like me who wants a government of action that fights for working families, I would probably be called libertarian. I wouldn't be a libertarian because it was not a noun back then. It was an adjective, but I would be described as libertarian in my politics because I advocate for the downtrodden. I'm a critic of the capitalist state and its repression. But nowadays, we all know that the word libertarian refers to a set of political beliefs that generally call for less restrictions on personal behavior and less regulation of the economy. That argues that basically government, the role of the state, needs to be drastically reduced in all of society. Libertarianism is a political movement in the United States. It started in the 1970s with the Libertarian Party, but it was a combination of some other political trends that had been around. The old right of the John Birch Society and others had a lot to do with libertarianism, but the old right were socially conservative, right? They were anti-abortion. They were certainly opposed to homosexuality. They were, they thought social liberalism was all communist. They were traditional and religious, etc. But the Libertarian Party of the 1970s was a lot of people who'd been in the John Birch Society, been in far-right groups, as well as a layer of hippies. Hippies who were considered leftists, hippies who were not communists. They were not attracted to the communist ideology and liked drugs and liked sex and rock and roll and wanted to push back on the social conservatism of America. And together, the old right elements who were willing to, drop their social conservatism, or at least consider it a matter of states' rights or personal choice, right? And that's a lot of them said, well, we would be opposed to the federal government restricting it, but, it is a matter of personal liberty, as well as a layer of counterculture hippies, hippies who read Ayn Rand novels. They formed the Libertarian Party. Which came into existence in the early 70s, and then later, the Koch brothers, who were Republicans, and they're lower level oil capitalists, the descendants of Fred Koch, the chemist who made his money in the Soviet Union. They were funders of the John Birch Society. They funded the the Libertarian Party to make a statement in the 1980s. Gave it a lot of funding because they believed in the libertarian economic theories, and they really weren't thrilled about the social conservatism of the Republican Party. So to make a political statement, they funded the Republican Party in the 80s. Libertarianism was considered part of the Reagan coalition, but it was like a dissident faction of the Reagan coalition that was more socially liberal, more in favor, less excited about militarism, less excited about, especially not thrilled with the war on drugs, etc. But why am I talking about libertarians? Well, first of all, my relationship with libertarians, it's a long story. Maybe I'll tell later tonight, but I'm not going to get into it right now. But right now, many of the people that I respect deeply are libertarians. And in fact, I would say at this point, there are many libertarians whom I respect more than leftists, right? I mean, leftism has completely deteriorated into nothing. But there are many libertarians who not only, they do agree with me on certain really important things, like opposing World War III, like opposing bombing Iran, like opposing funding Israel, like opposing political repression, like opposing the emerging low-wage police state, like opposing censorship, opposing the Foreign Agents Registration Act, opposing the repression of Julian Assange, opposing NATO and others, people like Scott Horton, people like Angela McCurdle, people, there's a whole layer of these folks. And even though I don't agree with them, the reason I respect them more is because they're doing it. They're getting shit done. Angela McCurdle organized the Rage Against the War Machine rally twice in Washington, D.C. There were big anti-war protests that had leftists and Republicans and libertarians all over the stage opposing World War III. And I think that's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. And that's great. And I respect them far more than a lot of the people who may agree with me on paper, but they don't do anything about it, or they won't work with people with whom they disagree. And so my hat off to these libertarians. There are many people that are in the alternative media circles that I run in, that are fans of what used to be Sputnik, fans of what used to be RT America, fans of Jimmy Dore, that are in this libertarian sphere. And, I respect them, and especially because it seems like libertarians want to get shit done, and libertarians don't have Trump derangement syndrome. There are a lot of leftists who I used to agree with who just lost their minds in 2016 and now just sound like mainstream media and now are just shills for everything. A lot of them support World War III with Russia because they just hate Putin so much, because Trump, Putin, blah, 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 even though that's been debunked. And most leftists have completely lost the plot. Libertarians haven't. Libertarians are still opposing World War III. Libertarians are, and they don't, many of them don't like Trump, but they at least understand that Trump derangement syndrome is coming from a bad place. And, so when it comes to libertarians, I don't hate them. And many of them I really, really respect. And honestly, at this point, CPI, we are collaborating with many libertarians. There's a young man, I won't say his name. I don't know if he wants to have his name out on the internet, who's a libertarian, a very active libertarian in Chicago, who's putting door knocker flyers on door knockers for the CPI convention. He's a Libertarian Party member. He's he doesn't agree with our economic policies, but he sees that we're an anti-war group and we're getting stuff done. And he's a big fan of RT. And so he's out there with the people in Chicago putting door hanger flyers on doors. Good for him. So I don't want to spew hatred for libertarians. I really don't. Right? Especially since they, at this point, are playing a better role than any of the goddamn leftists are. I mean, I come out of the left historically, and my economic beliefs are what the left used to stand for, but the left has completely lost the plot, except for, a handful of people, including myself and others. Whereas a lot of libertarians on the issues that matter are right there. Libertarians were there for Julian Assange. Libertarians stood up for Uhuru and supported them. Libertarians are opposing Israel and its crimes. Libertarians are opposing the strikes on Iran. Libertarians are standing with Russia and Ukraine. A lot of amazing libertarians. So that's why I'm hesitant to go there, but I feel like I have to go here tonight. Because libertarianism is mixed in with neoliberal economics. And that would make libertarians cringe if you said that, because they think that libertarianism is more radical than neoliberalism. They would say, oh, no, we don't believe in the Federal Reserve. Oh, no, we don't believe in charter schools. We just want the government completely out. We're more radical. However, libertarian economics is austerity economics. It's austerity economics. They believe you can cut your way into economic growth, and you can't do that. And are you a libertarian? You want to debate me? Actually, hey, someone wants to debate me. I'm not afraid to debate. This can end real quick. There's certain things which I'm sure you can guess that if you bring up, you're out of here. You're out of here. But hey, I will give you the link. What the heck, right? Let's make this an interesting stream, right? Somebody wants to debate me. Someone wants to debate me. Come on, bring it on, right? If anyone, if this guy or somebody else wants to debate me, why not, right? There you go. If you want to jump on, Mr. Lawrence Jacoby, if you want to jump on, by all means, jump on. Again, you're out of here. You cross certain lines, you're out of here, buddy. I have to be able to see your face too. That's the other rule, right? Yeah, I have to be able to see your face, and if you cross certain lines, you're out of here. But yeah, you want to jump on, fine. But as I was saying, you cannot cut your way into economic growth. You can't. You cannot cut your way into economic growth. It's just not possible. Nowhere in the world has the economy improved and living standards gone up because they cut food subsidies, cut the jobs of government and workers, stopped investing in infrastructure. It does not work. And it's infuriating because there are all these lies that libertarians will tell. I mean, they're not consciously lying. They believe what they're saying. But there are all these flim-flam examples that they will point to of cuts creating growth. One thing that absolutely infuriates me, no, you have to show your face. You have to show your face if you're coming on. No, that's not an option. You're going to come on. You're going to show your face. I'm showing my face. You have to show your face. No, well, that's not how this works. No, I don't debate people where they get to hide. They get to hide, and I get embarrassed, and then they just get to hide behind and not say anything. Not how it's going to work, Mr. Sorry. Yeah, if you want, my rule generally, not just for you, but for everybody, is if you're going to come on the stream, you have to show your face. So if you're not willing to show your face, that's on you. But you're welcome to come on. And anyone else who wants to come on and debate me or talk about whatever is welcome to come on. But that said, the Chilean economic miracle. The Chilean economic miracle is something that I frequently hear from libertarians. And first of all, it's sickening. It's sickening because the Pinochet government in Chile, right? 1973, Chile had a president who was a social democrat named Salvador Allende. He was a reformist socialist, called himself a Marxist. He was elected president. And the military of Chile was pushed by the United States to overthrow the Chilean government. And the response was mass murder. There was mass murder and killing on a massive, massive scale. And that's political repression. That's not government policy. But it was really brutal. Read about what was done to Victor Jara, the folk singer. Read what was done to him. It was very, very horrendous. And then following it was economic disaster, absolute economic disaster. And Chile's economy didn't start improving until the 80s, when Pinochet, the military dictator, started nationalizing things again, right? Chile, yeah, they did have an economic miracle a decade later when they stopped following libertarian policies. But while Milton Friedman and the Chicago School of Economics were running Chile, the result was 30% unemployment, children passing out in schools everywhere because they were malnourished. There's still thousands and thousands of people in Chile who are mentally disabled because they grew up in the time of Pinochet, and their school milk subsidies were cut off, and they didn't have enough food when they were kids. Chile suddenly had a big problem of child prostitution. And, because, there were homeless children everywhere being rounded up and made into child prostitutes. What was done to Chile under Pinochet? I mean, first of all, it was a human rights abomination. Now, libertarians on the internet, everyone's mean and nasty on the internet, first of all. And I need to give libertarians a pass on this, right? For every libertarian who makes a mean helicopter or Pinochet joke, there's some asshole communist who makes a gulag joke that's not funny. Gulag jokes are not funny, right? You should never joke about any political repression. But your typical libertarian internet bro thinks the political repression, 20,000 people rounded up in a stadium and killed, that's cool because they're communists. Yeah. Okay, fine. But that's political repression, right? And communist governments engage in political repression too. So we can just put that aside. The economic consequences of Pinochet's policies in Chile were not good. And things didn't improve until they got away from the policies. Milton Friedman was chucked out of Chile, and Pinochet, desperately trying to hold on to power, started nationalizing industries and using the military and using the government to build up industries, and started to turn into like a Park Chung-hee kind of figure, your typical U.S.-backed military junta, from that time that was using the state to run the economy. So, okay, it looks like our guy is going to come on. So thank you. Yeah, thanks for adhering to my rule about the face. Welcome. How you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Good. What's your name?
My name is Cameron.
Oh, good to meet you, Cameron. How are you?
I'm great. Honestly, I said the debate thing when you were talking about how libertarians were good, but then you went into some sort of rant about them being like shit, and I mostly agree with that.
What's
I live
that?
in Argentina.
Oh, okay.
I live in Argentina.
My president.
Yeah.
Go on.
My president is an ANCAP, which is probably the worst ideology.
Yeah, he's a piece of garbage. Yeah. I no disrespect to you. I mean, your Argentine people are amazing. I admire Juan Perón and many other things, but yeah, that Javier Milei, and he calls himself a libertarian, but he's just a neocon. He's a Zionist, right? He left the BRICS, right? I mean, he just sounds like a conservative, right? Or no?
Well, there's no way to actually do libertarianism.
Right.
It's sort of similar to communism, the way I see it.
Okay. Go ahead.
You sort of need the entire world to accommodate into some sort of way for it to be properly implemented. You should look into Peronism, and not historically, but the ideology. It's genius. And I think in the USA, it would be a great, it would be great because you can incorporate stuff from the Republicans and the Democrats. I think the Republicans are way better than the Democrats today. Even with Trump's evil, bullshit, the Democrats are just fucking satanic. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I mean, I tend to agree with you. And, we just had a big day of national protest in the United States against Trump. It was called No Kings. And one of our members actually attended it and wrote an article about it because, and the thing is, it's Trump is doing a lot of bad things right now. But the theme of the protests against him was that we can't have strong leaders, right? It's this liberal anti-authoritarianism. No, Trump is a weak leader. That's the point. Yeah. He's doing exactly what Israel wants. He's doing exactly what the bankers want. And it's not that we don't need strong leaders. It's that we need Trump to actually be a strong leader and say no to Israel and kick the bankers around and all of that, right? And that my issue with Trump is not that he's authoritarian. He's not authoritarian. He's letting our de facto rulers rule. And if you don't have a strong government that fights for the people who have the money just kind of rule by default, right? And that's what the liberals want. And that's why Trump is kind of a threat to the liberal order, even though he's doing things that are not a threat to them at all. Just the fact that he has kind of the support that he has, just the fact that he's spoken against the military-industrial complex and all of that, he scares the liberal order, and they fear that he could become some kind of Bonapartist figure, and so it's like who's worse, Trump or the Stop Trump movement? I don't know. I mean, at this point, Trump is in power, so he's the one doing things. But the Stop Trump movement are the people that raided the Uhuru movement and threw them in jail. The Stop Trump movement are the people that basically made it a crime to work at RT. The Stop Trump movement, so I don't know. I mean, there you go. But yeah, Javier Milei, an awful guy, just an absolute awful guy. Yeah. I thought you were a libertarian coming on to debate me.
No,
But
no,
you're
no,
you're an
absolutely not.
anti-libertarian like me. So there you go.
Yeah, I think I am way more anti-libertarian than you. I actually think communism and libertarianism are. I think you'd be more in line in a way, at least philosophically, with libertarianism than with my ideology.
What is your ideology?
Uh, I hate to say Peronism because it's hard to actually like pin it down, but I guess economic nationalism, the way Trump is doing it, like fucking huge tariffs, especially for third world countries. Maybe America doesn't need it as much as Argentina or some other exporting nations, like third world stuff.
Yeah.
But then I guess in terms of like social issues, I don't really care as much. But I strongly disagree with Marx in terms of religion and like materialism, I guess. Like,
Yeah. Well, I do
think
too
it's
at this point.
bullshit and it's pretty degenerate.
Well, I wouldn't use the word degenerate exactly. I mean, I just don't agree with it. I believe that spirituality is a big part of life, and that the dialectical materialist philosophy that says all that exists is matter, that there's no spirituality, and then all that matter is defined by conflict only, right? I don't agree with that, and that's why we're kind of moving toward the label of innovationism. And also, actually, it's interesting. Part of the reason we made this turn to move away from the Marxist label and towards, kind of pioneering something new is because we studied the rise of Javier Milei in Argentina. Because from what I understand, a big reason he got support is that there's a lot of gig economy workers in Argentina, right? People who are like,
Can you repeat that?
There's a lot of gig economy workers in Argentina, right?
I don't know what that means.
Well, it means you don't have a regular
Gig
employer.
economy?
Yeah, gig economy. Like you're hustling to get by, right? Like Uber drivers, or you're selling stuff on the internet, or
Oh,
you're
like informal work.
right. And the labor movement does not speak to those people, right? And that Marxism is the ideology of labor unions, etc. And it doesn't speak to those people at all. And those people often see themselves as capitalists, even though they're being exploited usually by a corporation to do their work. They see themselves as capitalists, and they kind of compete with other gig economy workers, right? And their own ingenuity has a lot to do with how much money they make. And because of that, the kind of the labor union solidarity message and the idea of like the workers in the factory are going to seize the factory from the boss, that doesn't go over with them at all. And also, from what I understand, prior to Milei, Argentina's laws were written in a way that labor, workers in factories and government employees had protections, but, gig economy workers got nailed in taxes. They got, they were really badly treated. And so the libertarian message of like, you're the great individual, the state shouldn't mess with you, really hit home with them because, they're kind of isolated gig economy workers, and the tax code was rigged against them. Is there any truth in that?
Absolutely. I don't think the rise of Milei was ever very ideological. You can go around in Argentina and ask people about their beliefs. They never match with usually what they voted. You can probably see the same in the US. It's more of a feels thing. You had this guy fucking calling everyone a dumb cunt, and people resonated with that. And I think the world, even the US with Trump, is yearning for revolution. Yeah. Revolution from the liberal system, revolution from globalism. I think, I don't know when was the last time that I could see America so ready for a revolution. It doesn't have to be violent. Actually, it should probably be like some sort of harmony. Like, I think the Republicans right now are way better at, in terms of aesthetic, representing the workers' movement, than Democrats. I think.
Yeah, you're right. Go on, please.
If you wanted to start a real workers' movement, unless the Democrats make a big shift, it would be better to do it within the Democratic Party after Trump's leadership is over, because it will be over just because of his stupidity. I think he's actually going to do well economically, but yeah, I think the Democratic Party is fucking cooked. There's no fucking way to save it unless you, I don't know. But there's not a single leader that actually seems to be talking to the genuinely common working man.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And that,
They're talking to like a fucking idealized version of Americans.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Trump, I mean, many people have pointed out, Trump lowered the taxes today of everyone who didn't vote for him. Trump was voted for by low-income people, working-class people, and the people who their household makes over $100,000 a year, those people overwhelmingly didn't vote for Trump, but they're the ones that got a tax cut. What sense does that make, right? Trump should, you'd think he'd want to lower the taxes of the people who voted for him. But he lowered the taxes for the people who hate him. The college educated, cosmopolitan middle class that are woke. They're the ones that got a tax break. The lawyers and the doctors and and the East Coast snobbery. They're the ones that got a tax break. Whereas the poor and working people who voted for Trump because they want to drain the swamp and they're mad at the establishment, they're the ones that that didn't get a tax break and got kicked off their health care. I mean, it's pretty crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But, I really appreciate what you're saying. And I agree. I think you and I are of similar perspective. I admire Juan Perón of Argentina a lot, by the way. And Peronism, I've studied, what I can. There's not a lot in English, but I really admire him. There's a figure in the United States called Huey Long.
Yeah.
They often compare Juan Perón to. But I must say that, just to acknowledge our audience here, the way you and I are talking right now, there's a lot of Americans that are going to be watching this and they're going to go, what? What we're saying makes no sense in American politics, right? How can we be genuine populists, right, and fight for the working man and say the Republican Party is at least aesthetically better than the Democrats? That doesn't make any sense, right? And because our politics in Argentina, your politics is much more sophisticated, whereas in America, it's, red team versus blue team. And, kind of like what you were describing with Malay a little bit, where people vote based on the personality of the person, how they like them. And, and that, the Trump people call everyone they don't like a communist, right? And they believe capitalism is the only alternative to communism. Anyone who doesn't believe in capitalism is a communist by de facto. So everyone who's at all critical of capitalism, they say, oh, he must be a communist, right? And then on the left, they say everyone who supports Trump and everyone who, is a part of that is actually a Nazi or a white supremacist or a fascist. And on the left, they don't really care about economics at all. And if you talk about economics, they call you a class reductionist. That's the slur. If you say anything, right, about economics, you're a class reductionist. You just need to wave the rainbow flag 24 hours a day. And you need to just scream at everyone for being, call everyone racist. That's what you're allowed to do on the left. And if you do anything other than that, then you're secretly a Nazi. And that's, when Trump first got elected, I didn't vote for him, and I was on the left, and the left didn't want me. The left, they spent, it was like I was not allowed to be a leftist. And I realized that largely it was an ethnic thing. I'm a white dude from a small town in Ohio. I'm an Irish American. And, people I went to school with grew up in trailers, and I consider myself a Christian. I returned to my Christian faith in 2015. Leftists don't like people like that. Leftists tend to be wealthy, urban, middle-class, rich people who have a white savior complex, right?
Well,
the
Democrats have nearly chosen the white working class as an enemy, almost at least the way they present themselves, it really looks that way in the U.S.
No, Biden, his first speech that he gave when he came into office was tremendous, actually. And if he had done any of the stuff in that speech, I think he would have been a great president. He didn't do any of it. But one of the things he promised to do was rebuild the infrastructure of the country. He was going to build new highways and bridges. And then I can't even believe this. The Washington Post came out with an article that among Biden's staff, there was opposition to rebuilding the infrastructure because it was considered a white issue. Can you believe this? Power plants. How are power plants white? Right? How are power plants white? How are bridges and highways and railroads white? There's nothing white about them. Black people use those things as well. But it's because you're not dividing Americans. You're not pointing at and it's anti-populism. They think populism is the equivalent of fascism. They want to incite Americans against each other And they want, they want the majority to always be demonized, and they want to find some minority. It doesn't matter what minority it is, a racial minority, a sexual minority. They want to find some minority that is suffering and being persecuted, and they want to point to them and say, see, the majority are bad people who need to be controlled, right? That's the narrative that has taken over leftism. It is anti-populism, right? And it's what it really is. It's crypto-Zionism. Right. And let's just be honest about that. I'm at the point I used to hold back, but no, it's crypto-Zionism. Right. It is what Lenin, who was himself Jewish, said, denounced and called the spirit of the ghetto. It is Jews were isolated from European society. They were forced to live in these separate neighborhoods called ghetto. And they viewed the wider European society they lived in as inferior, as dangerous because of the pogroms and all of that. And that leftism has become dominated by crypto-Zionism, right? Where they don't outright support Israel, but they still have this mindset that the bulk of the people are bad and dangerous and need to be controlled, and special protections have to be made to control them. And they're not opposing racism and opposing discrimination on the basis of wanting to empower the entire working class. They're opposing racism and discrimination on the basis of, see, the majority are bad and need to be controlled, right? It's I could go on about this for a long time, but that's what dominates leftism. Anti-populism, the notion that the masses of people deep down are dangerous and evil and totalitarian. That mindset of the new left that has a Zionist undertone to it, that dominates leftism. And as a result of that, when Joe Biden is president and he says, I want to take action for infrastructure, and then his team that's been trained in Ivy League schools with leftist professor says, oh, we can't do that. That's a white issue. I mean, that right there just tells you, right, that leftism has become completely bankrupt. I mean, you're not allowed to do anything that would raise the condition of all Americans. Instead, you have to be focused on tearing down those who are perceived to have privilege, on highlighting the injustice of a minority. It's really sad. One of these communist groups that is actually very good on foreign policy, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. They stand with Iran, etc. But their platform, instead of saying that they would provide medical care for all, it said they were going to focus on closing the gap in maternal death rates between white and black mothers. And I saw that and I'm just like, what? You're going to close the gap? How about we make sure no mothers die in childbirth? And it almost makes it sound like, to make it more fair, they want more white mothers to die in childbirth, so then it's fair. Like, the way you make everyone equal is by lifting up everyone. Maybe you start with those who need it the most. Absolutely. But the idea that we're just focusing on making everyone equal, we're not focusing on improving everything, that is dangerous. That is the degrowth mindset. And that is really, really dangerous. But anyway, I could talk all night. You're in Argentina. You probably have a lot more perspective. But tell me more about why this Malay guy gets away with what he does, how he got elected, and what you think can be done about it.
Well, partly the main reason he got elected, and this is almost like an obvious thing, but it's because the last two governments, at least the last two governments, were absolutely awful. Macri was 2015 to 2019. That's sort of neoliberal stuff. Then Alberto Fernandez, which is 2019 to 2023. Social democracy, really like inflationary, Keynesian maybe, and then the world really. I think it's a global thing. People are looking for change, for radical change. It's sad. I'm not entirely sure how it stopped. I definitely think it's a populist. I don't think the answer is a Joe Biden. I don't think going more moderate will, maybe you'll win an election, but your political essence will be fucked, because you're not standing for shit. You're just it's posing. We need populism. We need a real populist majority movement. The same thing the U.S. needs, really.
Yeah. Well, do you know about our movement in the USA, the Center for Political Innovation? Do you know about us? Oh, well, you should check out our website, cpiusa.org. Our slogan is, we need a government of action to fight for working families. That's the slogan.
You know what the slogan of Peronism is?
What?
A government enslaved by a free people. pueblo is the actual word.
I like
But
that.
I think that's a way better way to look at politics.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, thank you for joining us. I really
Thank you very
appreciate
much
it.
for having
And
me.
yeah, what's funny, I was expecting to debate a libertarian, and I found someone who's more anti-libertarian than I am because he's living
Yeah.
under a libertarian president who's done a crappy job. So very good to talk to you, and thank you very much.
I was hoping to talk to an atheist, and I found a Christian, so we were both pleasantly surprised.
Well, very good. Talk to you soon. Great. That was wild. Isn't that wild? Right? Isn't that wild how these things work? That was a great conversation. And, it's interesting. We have a lot of viewers in Argentina, right? There's a lot of people who watch this channel from Argentina. Gavin, Gavitron, he lived in Argentina for a while. He was one of our longtime community members. He's going to be speaking at our upcoming conference. And, that's wild. This is interesting. But anyhow, libertarian economics, right? The economic theories of Adam Smith, updated and repackaged by the Montpellier Society and the Austrian School, Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich von Hayek. The idea that it's always better to get the government out of things. It's not founded in economic reality. It's simply to justify cuts in social programs. And I have pointed out many times, the greatest economic expansion in human history was the post-World War II economic expansion. After World War II, half the world had been blown up. All the major cities in Europe and in Asia had been destroyed. And as a result of that, there was a great economic expansion. And from 1946 until 1971, or some people even say 73, there was a huge economic expansion. And there was no libertarianism. There was no free market policies. In Europe, it was the heyday of social democracy. In the communist world, communism was rapidly expanding and industrializing countries with 5-year economic plans. And on top of that, it was the heyday of, US-backed military regimes. Nobody was talking about free market economics. The austerity economics that now is so widespread that says, if we just cut everything, we'll have growth, which doesn't work. Austerity economics became popular in the 1970s after the U.S. economy crashed, after the economic downturn. And it was used to justify austerity. And it was used to cut spending. And it was just an excuse. It's flim-flam. It's something invented to justify austerity. In 1973 in Chile, they implemented free market policies, and it destroyed Chile. In the early 80s, in his country, Argentina, after the overthrow of Perón's daughter, Isabella Perón, they then implemented free market policies. It was a disaster. After the fall of the Soviet Union, in Russia and the surrounding countries, they implemented free market policies and sold off all the government assets to the highest bidder. And it's a disaster. Never has a country gotten stronger because of free market economics. And, the British Empire were the ones always promoting free market economics. They created a famine. Ever hear about the potato famine in Ireland? The potato famine in Ireland. We always hear that, all these Irish Americans fled to the United States because there were bugs eating the potatoes. Well, it wasn't just that. It was at the same time that bugs were eating the potatoes, the British government cut all the subsidies and lifted all the regulations. And so if your potatoes got eaten by bugs, you were royally screwed. And the Whig Party, the Conservative Party in Britain at that time, implemented crazy free market policies that caused Irish people to lose their land like crazy, and wealthy, Anglo-Protestant landowners to get control of all the land. And so basically all these Irish people lost their land and became homeless, and they had to flee to America. It was caused by free market policies. And, the British Empire, the people in China didn't want to accept free market policies. So the British waged 2 opium wars to force China and force the Chinese emperor to accept free market policies. And it was a disaster, and it caused, millions of deaths in China, and it destroyed China's economy. They called it the century of humiliation. Free market economics does not work, right? And after, the Great Depression of the 1930s, right? It was a result of free market policies. And After the Great Depression, after World War II, there was what they called the Keynesian consensus. They understood that the Great Depression happened because of the free market. And as a result of that, they would not allow the economy to get out of control. And John Maynard Keynes, who was the British Empire economist, said the government must spend money. Keynesianism, the idea that the government spends money to stimulate the economy, was considered normal and acceptable because everyone understood that the Great Depression was caused by overproduction. It was caused by the fact that there was too much stuff. Capitalism has a built-in problem called overproduction. And this is why CPI has to exist. This is what Marx spent his life writing about. This is what, it used to be common sense. Marxists no longer talk about it because they're just degrowth shills. They're getting funded by the Rockefellers and, big Ford Foundation grants to write about, why we need degrowth. And the right wing never knew about it. But the problem with capitalism is that it is the only system in history where poverty can be created by abundance, where people can be homeless because there are too many houses, where people can be hungry because there is too much food. That is the problem with capitalism. Abundance creates poverty. The tendency of the falling rate of profit, the problem of overproduction. And I'll actually show this video that I've shown on here before, but it must be shown where I talk about this. And I explain this built-in problem, why the capitalist mode of production leads to gluts of overproduction, right? Shout out to Peter Coffin, who edited this clip together. This is me explaining the built-in problem of capitalism, right? Self-driving cars should be a great thing, but under our irrational system, it would lead to riots in the streets and mass unemployment. Here we go.
Explain what needs to be explained, what used to be considered Marxism 101, about why it is that our Western capitalist economy is crashing and burning. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to do some math. And I hate math. Do you know why I hate math? Because I grew up in America. I went to public school in the United States of America, so I am going to, at risk of embarrassing myself, because math was never my best subject, I am going to do some mathematics here on the board for you to explain the problem.
I very much enjoyed Caleb's speech.
So if you are creating a product, right? If you're a factory owner, you're making a product, you are going to need the material through which that product is made, the manufacturing materials. So that'll be A.
The simple equation you put forward to explain the crisis of overproduction and the falling rate of profit.
And you're probably going to need to transport the product to where it's sold. That's B.
It broke down where your money goes.
You're also going to have to pay your labor costs. Labor costs are represented by C.
Explanations of those concepts that people are able to understand.
Then when consumers purchase the product, they're going to pay a final price. And that final price is D. However, there's a problem with that.
I like the fact that he framed it that way to make it very clear.
Which is that the capitalist can't change how much A costs. He can't change how much B costs. So the profit of the capitalist can only be extracted from the value put into it by the worker. And this is the basis of Marxism, the understanding of surplus value.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere. I've never been able to explain it that simply.
So C, the labor value, is divided. You have C1, which is what the worker actually gets paid. And then you have C2, which is the profit that the capitalist makes. And it all adds up to D, which is the final cost of the product. Now, the way people in the United States who talk about Marxism generally talk about this is they say, well, this is unfair. They say the worker is not getting paid the full value of his labor. But they're missing one of the most important points, which is not just that it's unfair and then people argue, well, what about the employer? He put up the money, doesn't he deserve to be? That's all a distraction. Because the important thing to understand is this. C1 is always going to be less than D. The wages paid out to the worker are never enough to buy back the product that he produces. There is always more products created than there are wages paid out to the worker. And this is the built-in problem of capitalism, the problem of overproduction. And it is always there in the capitalist economy. It never goes away. And they have invented all kinds of crazy mechanisms to try and deal with the problem of overproduction. Part of the reason that the US government has purchased billions and billions of dollars worth of cheese only to bury it in a cave in Springfield, Missouri, is to deal with this problem. It is an ongoing present problem, and it's a problem acknowledged by most capitalist economists. John Maynard Keynes said the problem was underconsumption rather than overproduction, but he was pointing to the same problem. The military-industrial complex in the United States is an effort to deal with this problem, to keep spending going. There's all kinds of mechanisms that they've invented to try and resolve this problem, but it gets worse. What is the capitalist always trying to do? He wants to maximize the amount of profit he makes. And one of the main ways they do that is with what's called labor-saving technology. Get rid of workers and replace workers with machines. As they eliminate workers from the process of production, as there's fewer and fewer workers involved, as machines take the place of workers, the role of C in production decreases. There's a little bit of a problem with that. As C goes down, C2 also goes down, right? As C decreases, C2 also decreases. And as the role of the worker in production is reduced, the rate of profit that the capitalist makes goes down. And this is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. Only human labor creates value. And this is something that Adam Smith acknowledged. This is something some of the popes even acknowledge. Human labor creates all value. And so when you reduce the role of human labor in production, the amount of value created decreases, and the ability of the capitalist to extract surplus value also decreases. So this causes the capitalist to have to churn out even more products because he's making less and less of a profit on the overall product. He's making less and less of a percentage, so he has to churn them out. So this problem of the worker never being able to buy back what he produces and more products being created than are necessary, this problem becomes exacerbated. And this points to what is understood to be the deeply irrational nature of the capitalist system.
Yeah, now, libertarians just can't acknowledge that that exists. And that is essential to understanding the market. Every economist knows the phrase glut, G-L-U-T, glut. That refers to this problem of overproduction, of the market becoming saturated with products and an economic crisis as a result. Right. And yet libertarians just can't acknowledge this exists. And they just, if it happens, they say, well, it's the government fault. It's the government that did it. Right. And that's libertarians. I hear libertarians say things about economics that are so wrong. It infuriates me. A common libertarian trope is they say, well, there's never been a monopoly that wasn't created by the government. Bullshit. The market naturally leads to a monopoly. Because when you have a crisis of overproduction, some companies go under and some don't. And the companies that don't go under then buy up the companies that do go under. And you get one company instead of 5 or 6 companies competing. And that's why we have antitrust legislation. The capitalists themselves, J.P. Morgan, others, they wrote the antitrust legislation because they are the ones that wanted the market to keep going. And not have monopolistic stagnation. The idea that every problem in capitalism is somehow just because there's a government, and if you just get rid of the government, you don't have gluts of overproduction, you don't have unemployment. That's not actually true. The market isn't magic. The market has inherent flaws. The market was a great advance over feudalism, but at this point, human productive forces have outstripped the narrow restraints of the profit motive, right? You need a centrally planned economy. And libertarians, they don't acknowledge any of this. All the problems of the market are really just the government's fault somehow. And the market, is magic. And they've never seen real capitalism, right? Every time you point to a problem with capitalism, they just say, well, it's not really capitalism because there's a government. There's this ideal fantasy land where the government's never involved and everything is better that has never existed, right? I think Ayn Rand called it capitalism, the unknown ideal, right? So based on the fact that there's this fantasy land of a perfect world where there's no government because the market just magically works, based on that, we're supposed to accept cuts in Medicare and 17 million people losing their health care. We're supposed to accept, laying off of government employees and all kinds of spending power being taken out of the economy and all kinds of working people no longer having decent wages and the protections that come with that. We're supposed to accept cuts in food stamps and poor people not being able to buy food because, hey, according to their theory, it's never been seen, but in their mind, there's this magical world called real capitalism where the magical market just solves everything. And every time you try to move closer to that goal, what you get is a nightmare. And it's never been realized anywhere. And, every time we try to move towards it after the fall of the Soviet Union, they tried that in Eastern Europe, nightmare. They tried that all over Latin America in the 70s, 80s, and especially in the 90s. It doesn't work. And we've been trying, and this is what I don't get, right? We are the most libertarian of all Western countries. Libertarians don't appreciate this, right? But, in most European countries, and in all of them until recently, Britain just got rid of free college, but it used to be you had free college. In America, you always had to pay for your college. In almost every other country in the world, in almost every other country in the world, there is guaranteed health care. There's a state health insurance or there's a state national health care service. We don't have that here. Almost every other country in the world, education is more subsidized than it is over here. So according to libertarian logic, we should be the most prosperous country in the Western world, right? We have more school choice and privatizations than anybody. We don't have national health care. We don't guarantee college to people. We have almost no welfare state over here. We have very, very limited workplace protections. The labor unions here are very weak. You go to Britain, the kind of laws that protect employees are much more massive, etc. So according to that, according to libertarian logic, America should be the best place in the Western world. Well, we ain't. The life expectancy in France and Germany and the Netherlands and Norway and Sweden and places like that is much higher. And they have, a much better life for their population. Now, maybe their GDP growth isn't the same rate as ours, but in terms of how the population lives, we're living a lot worse. That doesn't match, right? Libertarians, that's what libertarians, they live in this. And I remember John Stossel, right? He's this conservative libertarian guy. And he would always do pieces that looked like they were kind of edgy. He did a whole series for one of the major networks, CBS or ABC. And it was like, are we really number one? And he was saying America wasn't number one. He was criticizing U.S. government policy. And it seemed edgy. And then, he was showing ways in which the United States was not number one, in terms of how educated our population is, in terms of this and that. But then his solution was always more privatizations and more cutbacks. And if you look at it, the European countries that have bigger welfare states that don't have more privatizations and don't have cutbacks, and they are better off. It's this weird thing where libertarians think somehow it's radical in the United States, in the most free market Western country that exists, where we don't have guaranteed health care, we don't have guaranteed education, where, the workplace protections are very low. We're not guaranteed a weekend or vacation. I mean, it's like the government really isn't sticking up for American workers at all. Okay. I mean, we do have a minimum wage. There are some things that the government is forced to protect us with, but largely the American government just sits back and, lets the corporations do whatever they want to us. But libertarians look at that and they say, oh, if only we would just get rid of the minimum wage, if only we would just get rid of the Office of Workplace Health and Safety, if only we would just get rid of food stamps, everything would be better. It doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. And libertarianism, it's funny because everything that you've ever heard about communism is true about libertarianism, right? Communism, right? What is the stereotype? Is that communism, it's failed everywhere it's ever been tried. But then the communists all say, well, that's not real communism. Well, sadly, for most leftists, that's true. But that's libertarians to a T. Every example of a libertarian government has produced economic disaster. And their response to it is to always say, well, that's not real libertarianism. Also, what is the other thing they say about communists? Communists don't care how many people die in order to implement their policy, right? Well, that's libertarianism. Pinochet's Chile, I told you, there was 30% unemployment. There were children passing out in school because they were malnourished, and they would like faint in class because the government cut the milk subsidies and cut the food subsidies, and families would pay 70% of their income just to have food because the food subsidies were cut. I mean, in Chile, when they implemented libertarian policies, people died in mass. It had a death toll, but that's good. It's a correction. And that's what they always say, right? 30% unemployment after Pinochet's in power. Oh, this is just an adjustment. Well, it's painful, but we have to just break out of the government spending. I mean, it's, they don't care about the humanitarian cost. They don't care about the humanitarian cost. And look, Waba, I hear you. And I get a bit repetitive, and, I don't want to have to talk this way, but CPI is absolutely necessary because there's nobody who does what we do. Nobody, right? The left is a dead end. And I've spent my entire adult life in the left, and there has never been more of a dead end than the left. They don't give a fuck about economics. All right. They don't. I have spent my life in leftist circles, and they don't care about economics, right? It's funny. Socialism is an economic theory. Karl Marx wrote a whole kinds of books about economics. Leftists don't care about economics. They just want to be mad and say, shut up, white man. And they're really fascinated by all the different exciting ways to be transgender. And they think Trump is a big fat Nazi, and leftists don't give a flying fuck about economics. They don't, right? Yes, I agree with you. And that's why CPI has to exist. We are special. We're the only people that are putting forward a program to rescue the country. Leftists don't care about economics. They're angry, and they want to get their anger out, and they're having a baby tantrum at society for being unfair, and they want to burn it down and tear it down. And there is no leftist group that has an economic policy to rescue the country. Party for Socialism and Liberation, right? The leftist group that is kind of right about foreign policy. Their platform in the election literally called for dismantling the U.S. power grid. That's literally what it called for. It said that we would immediately take all of the oil and gas and fossil fuel power plants and immediately replace them with windmills and solar panels. That is genocide. And I don't know what the hell they're smoking. Did Stalin destroy power plants? No, Stalin built the biggest power plants in the world. Did China destroy power plants? No, China today has the largest hydroelectrical facility in the world. They electrified the whole country. But PSL wants to dismantle the power grid, and it's in their platform because fossil fuels are bad. They're like killing Mother Earth, and that's like racist, and that's why I'm going to vote for Claudia de Cruz because power plants give power to like racist white men and who have guns and are really scary, and that's why we need to get rid of Trump. That's your typical American leftist. It is absolutely despicable. Right? They don't care about economics. They just want to talk about who's got privilege. And if you come forward and you say, look, I think we need a government of action to fight for working families, they immediately jump. Working families, that's anti-gay. Now, how is the phrase working families anti-gay? Gay people have families, right? There is no person in the world who is not the result of a sperm and an egg. So if you are a gay person or a straight person, you have parents. But somehow the phrase working families is anti-gay, right? And I have many times heard from leftists, many times, why are you trying to save the country? I've heard that ever since CPI started. They look at our 4-point plan. Why are you trying to save the country? Because I live here. That's why. Because I want to fight for the working class majority of this country, and I'm not really helping them if I am not trying to improve things in their country, am I? Leftism has morphed into nothing but this libidinal, Oedipal, it has nothing to do with class struggle. It has nothing to do with what Stalin was about. It has nothing to do with what Gaddafi was about. It has nothing to do with China. It is just adolescent rage commodified, right? And you read the Communist Manifesto, right? Karl Marx ends with a 10-point plan for Germany in 1848. And it's not a 10-point plan to make Germany worse. It's a 10-point plan to improve the economy. The Bolsheviks, when they took power, they redistributed the land. Stalin had 5-year economic plans to build the Soviet Union up into an industrial power. Fidel Castro provided medical care. He had a literacy campaign, wiping out illiteracy and bringing electricity to all of Cuba. Around the world, communist governments, they generally want to make life better in the country. In America, it's not just that leftists generally don't want to do that. It's not just that. It's if you do it like I do, like I've been advocating, you become a target. You become a target, right? Google me and see what they've done to me, right? They've run my name through the mud, even though I'm anti-racist, even though nobody's done more to support the Uhuru movement. I was protesting police brutality in 2010, long before it was a trendy hip thing to do. I actually videotaped the police beating up 2 black high school students and got them acquitted in juvenile court. But because I talk about economics, and I don't just talk about, racist white men and transgender, because I actually talk about what socialism is supposed to be about, I'm a neo-Nazi. I don't know how the fuck I'm a neo-Nazi. I don't advocate racial separatism. I don't blame the Jews for the world's problems. I don't admire that dude with a mustache who was in power in Germany in the 30s, but somehow I'm a neo-Nazi because I actually talk about economics, right? And that's why the left is a dead end. And it doesn't seem that way on the surface. It seems like common sense, right? That if you want a government of action to fight for working families, why, you should join the Socialist Party. You should join the Communist Party. You should join the Socialist Workers Party. You should join the Revolutionary Communist Party. None of those groups want that. And that doesn't make any goddamn sense, but it's true. None of those groups want that. None of those groups want that. And if you show up in those circles and you advocate such things, not only are you not allowed to advocate those things, not only will they ignore you, but they will try to destroy your reputation. They will advocate violence against you. They will spread lies and rumors about you. The left is evil, okay? I'm just telling you this. The left is evil. There is just no way around this. The left is evil, okay? They're evil. I mean, they are evil people, right? The people that run the communist groups are evil people. They are evil people. And, their economic ideas are good, but they don't know what those economic ideas are. And I'm just telling you, the communist groups are run by evil people. Evil people. And that made me sound like hyperbole and all of that, but it is true. The Brian Becker, who runs PSL, that is an evil man. Right? The people who ran the Workers' World Party that I used to be in, those are evil people, right? The people who run the Communist Party USA, those are evil people, right? Read the hit piece they wrote about CPI. I was actually kind of honored, right? The Communist Party generally doesn't talk about other groups, right? As a rule, the Communist Party does not talk about other groups. They just pretend that they call themselves the real deal. They just pretend the other groups don't exist. But when CPI came into existence, they were so terrified of CPI, they wrote an article on their website, which I actually like, right? So I'm going to post the link. It's a great article that they wrote, basically announcing, that we exist. And it's a guy named Chris Butters wrote it. And it's this whole article. And they talk about our book that we wrote, We Are City Builders, a book that honors the Black Panthers, a book that celebrates, and somehow they claim that we're fascists. I mean, read this article. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts, right? You read it. It's like us existing, they had to defame us this way. And you read this article, right? It actually is great advertising for us, right? And I mean, they say a lot of like silly things that don't even make any sense. Like they don't know what they're talking about. And like, one of the things they talk about is that we talk against the deep state. Oh my God. We talk about liberalism, which we're talking about the philosophy of liberalism, not Democrats, right? They say we criticize wokeness. Yeah. We dare defend Huey Long. I mean, read this article. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And why in the world did they feel a need to go out of their way and defame us this way? Because we're what they're supposed to be, right? They're supposed to be a group that actually fights for working families. They don't. They don't, right? They hate working families. Working families are all evil, racist, white Euro settlers who need to, be impoverished. It is really amazing. And again, this may sound like hyperbole, and this may sound over the top. And I wouldn't be saying this if it wasn't for 25 years of living this. I'm 37 years old. I've been doing communist stuff since I was a teenager, and I have seen this with my own eyes. And I'm a genuine person who genuinely wants to stop World War III, who's genuinely motivated by the idea that, we should do unto others as we should have them do unto you, live for the sake of others. And what they have done to me, right? If you go into any communist circle in the United States and ask them about Caleb Maupin and CPI, they all know exactly who I am, and they'll all tell you, and he's bad, and they don't even know why, right? They don't even know why, right? And they'll say something that doesn't make any sense. Well, isn't he a neo-Nazi? Isn't he a white supremacist? And it's like, I'm married to an immigrant. I videotaped the police beating up women of color and got them acquitted in court. I was listed as the Uhuru movement as one of their biggest defenders, CPI. But yet somehow, it's just a fact. I'm in the Ku Klux Klan. I'm a white supremacist. I go around using racial and ethnic slurs and wearing white sheets on the weekends. I mean, this is what they would have you believe, right? This is, and I hate to get frustrated on these streams, but it's like, if this is their response to me, right? How are these groups not anything but evil, right? How are these groups not anything but evil, right? I have literally risked my life trying to bring medical aid to the people of Yemen. I have done more for the causes that these assholes claim to believe in than anybody. And they hate me more because of that. They're jealous. I'm taking the spotlight from them. It's unbelievable. So, CPI has to exist. I'm sorry, I got a little fired up there because I know what Waba is saying. Because I deal with this a lot, right? I was talking to somebody today, and they're polite, but they say, and they ask me what the plan is. How are we things are gonna get better? They say, how do things get better? And I say, we have to build CPI. I say, we have to build our organization. There's really no way around it. And they're like, yeah, but isn't there some other group that's like bigger and it's got more funding that can do something? I'm like, no, there's not. No, there is not. You know what I'm saying? There is not. I wish there was. If that was the case, I would be in that group, right? But there is not. There is not, right? And they say, well, isn't there a way that like the labor unions? No. CPI is what has to exist. All right. There's no way around CPI existing. There is no other organization in this country that advocates a government of action that fights for working families, that stands with Russia, that stands with China, that stands with Iran, that stood with the Uhuru movement the way we did. Nobody. There is none. There is no other organization that is doing what we're doing. None. Okay. So unfortunately, people who are like, okay, Caleb, I know you want to build your group, but there has to be some other way. There ain't. And I wish I could tell you there was some other way. And if there was some other way, I would be doing that way, right? I wouldn't be throwing all my resources and all that into trying to build CPI. I would be trying to build up some cause, that might have more backing behind it and might be more successful. What I'm telling you is there isn't, right? There isn't. There is nobody else doing what we are doing. Nobody else has a plan, and nobody else. What is your place, Waba? What's your place? I don't know where you're from, Waba. Where are you from? Waba. Right. Waba. Where are you from, Waba? I don't know where you're from, but there's nobody else who's doing what we're doing. And so, we have to do it. There is no alternative. There is no alternative. We have to be the voice that is out there putting forward a 4-point economic plan to improve people's lives, advocating economic development, linking the struggle of American working families to the struggle, to build a mass movement, and the United States and then the global struggle. There is no one else doing it, and we have to exist. We really don't have an alternative. I get fired up because I've lived this, and I do apologize for getting fired up there. But I understand where you're coming from, Waba. I really do understand where you're coming from. I understand completely how you wish there was a CPI in your place, right? Canada CPI is an inspiration. Thank you. Because who else is doing what we're doing, right? We wrote a book about the Houthis, right? I mean, I'll just give you an example. We wrote this book about the Houthis. The USA is bombing, or has been bombing, Yemen. And there's a group in Yemen that were the heroes of the entire world for opposing Israel, for erecting a picket line in the Red Sea, the American people needed to understand why the Houthis are their allies. So what did we do? We wrote a book. And we didn't just write the book. We made an audio book of it. And then we distributed this book in bulk. 400 copies went out just at the peace rallies they've had in Chicago. We distributed 1,000 of these all over the country. All over the country, we distributed these in order to get the American people to understand who the Houthis are and what they're fighting for. And we wrote a populist introduction to, the people of Yemen and their history and how the Houthis are an anti-austerity movement. We did it. Who would have done this? Name one other group that wrote a mass popular pamphlet explaining who the Houthis are and why American workers should support them. Name one. Nobody else did it. Nobody else thought that was important, right? No one else thought that was important. They thought it was, they loved marching through the streets with Palestine flags. But the idea of telling American working people why the Houthis are heroes and what their movement stands for, nobody else figured out to do that. We did. We just printed this book about Ibrahim Traoré. We just had a big rally in Chicago. It wasn't actually that big, but we had a rally in Chicago to support Ibrahim Traoré, right? And talk about how this great African leader is the kind of leader we need in America, who, controls the economy to raise up living standards. Who else is doing that? The Uhuru movement, they've had some rallies for Ibrahim Traoré, and we admire that. We work with them. We think they're great folks. But who else is doing that? But us. Nobody is doing it. And, so I guess I get fired up there because I get frustrated. I get very frustrated with people who, it's like, yeah, I get it, right? Look, CPI is not a huge group. We're not, we don't have that much funding. We don't have a huge amount of members. But we've changed the conversation in America in many, many ways, which I will go over at another time. But, I understand. And yeah, it would be nice if there was an alternative to CPI. Yeah, it would be nice if there was some other group that could be more effective than we are. But there is not. There is not some other group. We are the only ones putting out a pro-growth, constructive, optimistic, anti-imperialist message. We're the only ones doing that. No one else is doing it. No one else is doing it. And so, we have to do it. We have to build this organization. Yeah, we have a plan at this point. We have a plan. Okay, I'm going to remove somebody from the chat because it's just like, if you think that's what's happening, I'm not even gonna, I don't know. You just don't respond to people, but it is absolutely unbelievable. Right. But yeah, the key is to win common working people over as they are a great force for change. Exactly. Out of the movement to the masses. That is what we've always said. It's not about being the most popular in the protest gauge. It's about winning over the masses. And none of the leftist groups are trying to do that. So we have to do it. CPI is not a fandom. CPI is not a fandom. No, it is not a fandom. right? We are building a real group. I'm not trying to be popular on the internet. I'm trying to build a network of people to get the job done, And we are getting it done. We're getting it done. I'm going to show the video from our participation in the Iran rally. I'll show you. We went to a No War with Iran rally. And at this rally, people loved our Houthi book and people took it in big numbers. So I'm going to show that for now. We're here in downtown Chicago at a No War Against Iran rally. Should be interesting. We're going to talk to people, see how it goes.
We're here to stop a war with Iran, to stop World War III. We thought we dodged that bullet last year when Biden was trying to get us into World War III with Russia and Ukraine. Now it looks like Trump is doing the same thing in the Middle East, and it's just as dangerous.
Palestine, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, and now Iran. So it's actually really ironic because a U.S. diplomat at the UN Security Council said that, she wanted to say that it's Iran that's spreading chaos and instability and violence in the region, but she said Israel.
Israel's government has also spread chaos, terror, and suffering throughout the region. Iran's government.
So that was a Freudian slip that I think said a lot about in the unconscious of even these U.S. officials, and they know the reality. The reality is that Israel has engaged in an unprovoked war.
Now, China and Russia have both said that they are considering getting involved if the USA intervenes, and Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has said that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon and that they are not a threat.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program.
Stand for justice against genocide of the Israelis. That's the main cause, and to stop the war in Iran right now.
We need to keep our funds here at home. Money for America, not for these endless wars.
The last thing we need right now is another war, especially one in the Middle East. That's the last thing the American people want.
We need to keep our money here. We don't need to pay for medical care for them when we have none. I mean, it's not even, it wouldn't even be personal. If it was just about the money, like obviously people should have their money spent on their own citizens. And as far as their atrocities they're committing, I mean, that's ridiculous.
There is one country in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons. It is not Iran, it is Israel.
Israel has nuclear weapons. Everybody knows it, but our government pretends that they don't. And so this could definitely lead to a nuclear war, nuclear Armageddon, because once the nukes start flying, the U.S. gets involved, Russia, China, it's crazy. We're back to where we were last fall, worrying about a nuclear war.
Going with the books?
Going pretty good, man. Yeah, we've been getting them out to almost everybody. People seem really supportive,
Yeah.
We don't want to get people in this situation where there is no point of return. Everybody in the Middle East is going to be affected by the war. If the United States intervene in the war alongside Israel, I think a lot of factors going to be, happening and stuff.
Poll after poll after poll shows that the American people do not want a war, especially with Iran.
I heard some Dave Smith, the comedian, I think that's his name. He said no matter who we vote for, we always end up with John McCain. I thought that was really clever.
The nuclear issue is a distraction, and what they want to do is they want to bring regime change to Iran. They want to topple the government, and it's very dangerous. And I think there is actually a substantial American base right now, even the MAGA conservatives who oppose war with Iran. We saw Tucker Carlson do an interview, and he clowned and destroyed Ted Cruz. He's very pro-war. He doesn't even know the population of Iran.
How many people live in Iran, by the way? I don't know the population. At all? No, I don't know the population. You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple? How many people live in Iran? 92 million. Okay.
Approximately 70,000 tons of bombs on this 365-kilometer of land known as the Gaza Strip. That is the equivalent of multiple nuclear bombs. Yet the world is silent on that entity. The conversation is centered around, well, what should we do with what Iran possesses in terms of enriched uranium? What should we do about the Palestinians that don't care about so-called Israeli security? We're having the wrong discussion. The discussion should be, what should we do about the countries that currently possess nuclear weapons? There is a country in the Middle East that vehemently opposes an imposed nuclear weapons free zone in the Middle East. It is not Iran, it is Israel. And the United States. We should not ever, as Americans, tolerate that.
The entire world is looking on in horror as Israel bombs and commits a genocide against the Palestinian people. And the only people who have really done anything material about it, although other countries say nice things, is Iran. Iran is behind the Hezbollah and the resistance in Lebanon. Iran is helping out with the Houthis. And although American media likes to pretend that they're solely responsible for Hamas, that's not entirely true. But Iran does lend its support materially in a way that no other country does.
And so I think the MAGA conservatives, the left, the liberals, everyone should get together and oppose this war. And we know at the end of the day it's the oligarchs that make the decisions.
Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free! From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! Palestine!
The Palestinian people are to be free, then Iran needs to be strong. And a lot of people don't seem to understand that.
But even the oligarchs, I think if there is enough public pressure, they might back down. So if there's no direct U.S. involvement, I think there's a chance that it de-escalates and Israel backs off. And this would actually be great deterrence for Iran too, if Israel backs off. And this is what I'm hoping. And so please mobilize against this unnecessary war that U.S. and Israel are launching against Iran.
Palestine will live forever! From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea!
Yeah, I mean, there are just so many people here in support of the Iranian people and who support the Houthis. And I guess, you know, we just ran out of books. We didn't have enough. We brought 400 to 500. And we're all out.
No justice, no what? No justice, no peace. No justice, no what? No justice, no peace. Free, free Palestine.
All righty, that was fun. That was fun. I'm gonna keep doing my opening remarks for a little while longer here. It might be a longer stream tonight. I do want to remind you all that if you do have a question for the second half of our program, you can send a Rumble rant via Rumble, or you can send a Cash App to Caleb Maupin 22 on Cash App. These are the two ways we accept questions in the second half of our show. So send any questions that you got. Get me talking. Get me talking. Get me talking. We do appreciate it. So, you know, I guess that's what I wanted to talk about tonight is you can't cut your way into economic growth. A theme that has come up that we've talked a lot about on these streams is that we need to build an anti-monopoly coalition. In fact, that's what the Communist Party said they were for back in the 1950s. William Z. Foster advocated an anti-monopoly coalition. And the understanding it is imperialism, the rule of the big monopolies, that is the greatest threat. And that we need to unite all the forces that are opposed to the monopolies, that are marching us into wars, that are stripping away our civil liberties. We need to unite all who can be united against the big monopolies and their wars and their low-wage police state. And that is what needs to be done. And that an important part of the anti-monopoly coalition is going to be lower level capitalists. And that's really who the new right is. That's who Elon Musk is aligned with. He's broken with Trump. He's now starting his own party, the America Party, which we need to figure out how to intervene with the America Party, right? That's going to be important. We need to speak to the people that go and join Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is funding Thomas Massie right now. And that's all very interesting, right? We got to pay attention to this. And the Iran campaign in America right now is very important. Zoran Mamdi, right? Again, this guy's, he's from DSA. His wife is a regime change activist, but he is gathering together all the people in New York City that are opposed to Israel's crimes, all the people in New York City that want, free buses and want, grocery stores that are government subsidized, that provide healthy food. And he's got a great platform, and we need to speak to the people that are supporting Zoran Mamdi, right? We need to speak to them too. We need to intervene everywhere, but we need to build an anti-monopoly coalition, and that lower level capitalists are part of it. And right now, lower level capitalists generally believe in neoliberal free market libertarian economics because they view the government as stepping on them, which it does with regulations, with taxes, etc. And the government is rigged by the big monopolies, and it's stepping on the small businesses. And they believe that if we got the government out of the way, it would be a real fair level playing field and they'd be able to thrive. What they don't understand is that getting the government out of the way is not enough. You need a government that punches up. That's what you need. A government that punches up. And the only way you're going to get that is you have to build a mass movement of the working class. You have to bring working people into motion, right? The only way you're going to be able to have a government that can fight the big monopolies and break their power is if there is a mass movement of millions of people aligned with it. The only reason Roosevelt was able to pass Social Security, the only reason was because the Communist Party built huge unemployment councils, and the CIO did the sit-down strikes, and there were mass anti-fascist mobilizations. And because there was a huge mass movement of working people that supported Roosevelt, he was able to create Social Security, create unemployment insurance, hire millions of unemployed people to build highways and bridges. It was because he had a mass movement behind him he was able to do that. And that what we need is a government that'll break the power of the big monopolies and then use the state to invest in America, invest in infrastructure, invest in the population. And that's what our 4-point plan is really about, right? Our 4-point plan is, first, we want to hire millions of unemployed workers to rebuild America. New highways, new bridges, new power plants, new water treatment facilities, new universities, new hospitals. America just needs a total makeover. And there's all kinds of young people that are underemployed. We need to hire them and put them to work rebuilding America. That's step one. Step two, how do you pay for it? Easy. We put our natural resources under public ownership. Oil and gas and coal and timber and all the natural wealth of America should go into the public budget, right? We all have a right to it. This country belongs to every citizen who lives here. And instead of private companies getting rich off of our oil and natural gas and coal and timber and all of our natural wealth, it should go into the public budget, right? And that would pay for it. 3 is we create a national bank that lends money strategically in the interests of the country overall. And we declare a debt jubilee. We cancel the debts, right? And we create a gigantic national bank that will lend money based on an economic plan to rebuild the country. And then the final step is we then enact an economic bill of rights, the right to housing, the right to health care, the right to education. And we enact that economic Bill of Rights, not as a handout, but as an investment. If we're going to have a strong country, we should have full employment. The labor power of every individual should be utilized. So no one should be unemployed, right? If somebody is unemployed by the market, we should hire them and put them to work building highways and bridges or providing education or whatever. No one should be unemployed in America because that's a waste. We need human labor power to create wealth. Another point would be education. We need to provide good education. We need to once again start churning out doctors in America and engineers and scientists. Why? Because if you want to have a strong country, you got to have smart, educated people. And we need a national healthcare service. And why do we need a national healthcare service? Because if we're going to have a strong country, we need healthy people who can be creative and full of energy and have a lot of labor power. And that we need to invest in people because human labor power is the source of all wealth. Karl Marx wrote about fictitious capital. The Bible, the Quran, and the Torah all forbid lending money at interest. Speculation, right? That is fake wealth. And our economy right now is one gigantic speculative bubble. Only human labor power creates value. And so we need to unleash human labor power. We need everyone employed and being productive. We need everyone educated. We need everyone healthy. And we need a national bank directing credit strategically to communities. And we need all the wealth of our natural resources to go into the public budget to rebuild this country. And we need to start investing in our people. Those 4 steps, if we enacted them, that would be something that would completely rebuild America's economy. We would no longer be an imperialist country. We would be aligned with Russia and China. We'd be part of the BRICS world, and we'd have a pro-growth economy. And if you look at the countries around the world that have broken out of imperialism, like Russia, like Iran, like China, like Venezuela, Nicaragua, like Zimbabwe, like Burkina Faso, where they've got this great leader, Ibrahim Traoré, that's what they've all done. They have a government of action, a government that comes out of an anti-colonial revolution and invests in people, in human labor power. And as a result, their economy can keep growing. And when their economy falls short, the state intervenes and controls it so that it keeps growing. Right? I mean, in 2015, the global economy, in 2008, the global economy crashed, and China, and then the government stepped in and stabilized things. In 2015, the Chinese stock market went down by 60 points in a day. If the American stock market went down by 60 points in a day, there'd be riots in the streets. There would be mass hunger. Food would stop getting delivered. The lights would go off. It would be an absolute disaster. In China, the stock market went down by 60 points and nothing happened because most of the economy is insulated from market turbulence. And the Chinese Communist Party just called up, everybody, and they said, no more short selling. If you short sell, that's when you bet on a stock going down, you'll be arrested. So you want to short sell, we'll arrest you. And they froze the selling of stock on state-run industries. And within a week, their stock market had bounced up. Why? Because they have a popular government that controls the monopolies. The monopolies don't run China. The corporations don't run China. In China, the government controls the corporations and forces the corporations to work for public good. Right? That's the idea. That's the idea. In China, they have a government of action that fights for working families that controls the economy. They have a big market sector, which you need, right? They got all kinds of private companies, but at the end of the day, they have a popular government that pushes back the power of the big monopolies. And as a result, they don't have the problems that we have. And I see Philip Sang has sent a question, which I appreciate. He sent it over Cash App. We are taking questions on Rumble. There's a question from Hempcar that just came in on Rumble as well. So yeah, we are taking questions, via Cash App, Caleb Maupin 22, or you can send him in as Rumble Rants. Just a reminder, we have one Rumble Rant and one Cash App question that have come in so far, which is good, but send more questions. Always more questions are always good. But yeah, we need a government that invests in people and human labor power that is the source of all wealth. We need a government of action that fights for working families. And CPI has to exist. No one else is doing it. No one else is doing it. And there's a lot of people that are doing podcasts and throwing mud and fighting on the internet. And there are some socialist groups that want economic degrowth. and, you know, want to be foot soldiers of the ultra rich in their effort to contain and control Donald Trump, when Donald Trump's doing a shitty job right now, in my opinion. But they're afraid, you know, they're No Kings rally, right? The message of the No Kings rally was, we don't want a strong leader. Well, no, we need a strong leader. Trump is a weak leader. Trump is doing what Israel wants. Trump is doing what the big corporations and banks want. He just cut the taxes on all the people who hate him, the rich people, and he just cut the Medicare of all the people who voted for him, the poor people who are mad at the establishment. I mean, Trump is not, the problem with Trump is not that he's a king, he's a strong leader. The problem is Trump is a weak leader. And the whole theme of the No Kings rally was this liberal anti-authoritarianism, that strong leaders are bad. No, strong leaders are not bad. Trump is just not a strong leader. Trump is a weakling, right? He sends ICE to target immigrants, the weakest people in this country. People that can barely, you know, don't get paid minimum wage, right? Oh, that's strong. That's real tough. You know, you're sticking it to immigrant families, people who came over the border with nothing. Oh, you got them. You got them, right? You know, it's like Mike Tyson beating up on a 3-year-old, you know? A real strong leader would send ICE after Wall Street. A real strong leader would send the FBI to raid the American-Israeli Political Action Committee, right? That's what a strong leader would do, right? You know, that's what a strong leader would do. No, Trump is acting like a weak leader, right? And we need strong leaders. We need somebody in America like Ibrahim Traoré. That's what we need in America. We need a government of action to fight for working families. Let me repeat. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. So now I'm going to put on the video of our rally. You had no idea I was on Rumble. Well, here I am, Boris. Here I am. Rock me like a hurricane. You know, I'm going to put on our video about Ibrahim Traoré. You know, our rally that we did for Ibrahim Traoré, we might go a little bit longer, but people are sending in questions. So, you know, we'll answer questions soon. So here's the rally we did. And this rally, I must say, this has been on like 7 different YouTube channels in from Africa, and it's been on TV in Africa. And like, this is a really big deal. So I'm really glad we did this rally to talk about Ibrahim Traoré, and we're doing more rallies to talk about Ibrahim Traoré. When our team is in Chicago for the conference, we're going to do another rally for Ibrahim Traoré, and we're going to have a lot more people because there'll be people from all over the country there. So here we go.
Africa is not a mistake to be fixed. Africa is not a failed continent. Africa is the womb of the world, the cradle of civilization, the keeper of tomorrow's hope.
We know that Ibrahim Traoré is the future of the African continent, that he represents the African wing of the global anti-imperialist movement.
We see that he's providing health care for his people, he's putting people first, he cares about the infrastructure, he's creating systems so that people can thrive instead of being in poverty like we have here in this country.
So we are here telling people, hands off Africa. The colonialists need to mind their business.
Why is he a dictator in the mind of the American media? Well, because he cares about the people of Burkina Faso.
Let me tell you what Ibrahim Traoré is doing. He has got agricultural projects. Burkina Faso is having a farming boom right now because of this great African leader. He has just made a law that any woman who has a child, her medical bills are completely eliminated. It's free to go to the doctor and have a child in Burkina Faso, in this African country, because mothers and maternal care is so important.
You speak of democracy, yet uphold a global structure where the powerful few veto the dreams of the many. We will no longer whisper in rooms where we deserve to speak with full voice.
He's not a criminal, he's just being there for his people.
And if we could just follow his example.
The forces that are trying to overthrow Ibrahim Traoré are the same forces that keep Americans poor. We want a prosperous America, not one that is so focused on maintaining the global economic system that our own citizens live in poverty.
He admires Gaddafi, he admires Patrice Lumumba, he admires all the great African leaders of the past, and we're here to say that
American working people should look to Ibrahim Traoré as the kind of leadership we need. A builder, a constructor, someone who lifts people out of poverty, someone who stands with the new economy rising in the world of the BRICS with Russia and China.
Donald Trump, look at this man. Try to be like him. Don't be like Zelensky. Don't be a worm. Be a president like Ibrahim Traoré.
New economy emerging in the world, and it's based on real wealth. What China's doing with the Belt and Road Initiative, what Russia is doing with the Eurasian Economic Union, what is happening in Latin America with Bolivarianism, with the axis of resistance. There's a whole new economy. And this fake Wall Street derivative rip-off usury economy of Wall Street in London, that economy is the past. And the only future America is going to have is joining this new economy.
Imagine what we could have in this world just by doing what he's doing for his people.
What we need to do is get the United States to link up with this new economy in the global south and in the east, right? They lifted 1 billion people out of poverty in 20 years, right? We could be part of that. Instead, Donald Trump, on orders from Benjamin Netanyahu and the international banks, is trying to destroy that new system. No, we don't need to destroy it. We need to join it.
We are a spiritual people. Before your cathedrals, our ancestors sang to the sky. Before your missionaries, we knew the language of the rivers and the laws of the sacred forest. Christianity came, Islam came, and we received them not as slaves but as seekers. But now we ask, will the church and the mosque stand with us, truly with us, when all people are displaced by greed, masked as globalization? Will your pulpits echo our cries or only repeat the songs of the powerful? Faith, too, must be decolonized. It must walk with the poor, not the privileged.
Well, we're having a really important event coming up on July 12th at the Midwest Convention Center in North Lake near the O'Hare Airport. We're going to have speakers talking about the Houthis and the Yemeni movement. We're going to have speakers talking about the Palestinians. We're going to have speakers talking about Africa and what's going on there. We're going to have speakers talking about the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. We're going to have music. We're going to have traditional dancers from the former Soviet Union. It's just going to be really amazing in so many ways.
Anti-imperialist speakers, cultural performers, dancers, music. It's going to be really special. 500 like-minded people.
If you can't make it, send us a donation to cover all the costs. It certainly costs a lot to rent out this big venue and get everyone there.
To the youth of Africa, to the young boy selling oranges by the roadside, to the girl who walks 10 kilometers to attend school, to the child whose only toy is a stone but who dreams of stars. You are the reason we fight. Do not believe the lie that your continent is cursed. You are the blessing. Do not envy foreign passports. Be proud of your name, your land, your roots. The world may not applaud you now, but the future will speak your name in honor.
So we need to be paying attention to him. We need to be supporting him, and we need to be in unity around the principles that he's advocating for as a leader.
And he is standing up to AFRICOM, standing up to NATO, saying, U.S. out, we want to develop Africa for African people, not for the bankers on Wall Street who are not only keeping the people of Africa poor, but keeping people in this very city poor. Why are there so many homeless people in America? Why is our infrastructure falling apart? It's time that we hired the China Railway Company to build high-speed trains throughout the Midwest, connect Chicago to Washington, D.C. and to Los Angeles with high-speed railway. That's what we're talking about. We're saying it's time that we start having an education system that makes our kids smarter. We have social media apps that train our young people to be more confident and more physically fit. We need a government that invests in people, not a derivative rip-off government that makes profit from prison and war and death and destruction. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. And in Burkina Faso, this impoverished African country, they have such a government right now. They've got a builder, a man who believes that human beings are the source of real wealth in the world. And he is investing in his people, and they are raising up the population, raising up the life expectancy, raising up the living standards, raising up education, raising up healthcare, raising up access to a decent life. That's the kind of government we need here, a government of action that fights for working families. They're keeping you poor in this country as well. It's an absolute disgrace. We need leadership like Ibrahim Traoré. We need programs that will allow people to raise children. We need people to have jobs and education in schools. We don't need to be starting war after war, bombing people in the Middle East, bombing people in Africa, funding terrorists in the Horn of Africa, and then banning people from coming here. It's absolutely ridiculous. But it's going to be like nothing you've ever seen. That auditorium is going to be packed.
It holds 500. We think we can fill it. It's going to be a great event. So I hope you join us July 12th.
Long live Ibrahim Traoré! Long live Ibrahim Traoré! Long live Ibrahim Traoré! Long live Ibrahim Traoré!
It was actually really hectic trying to get the sign together.
Not taking orders from anybody.
As you can see, it's kind of jerry-rigged up. We kind of didn't have the right stuff. We had to go back and forth to Home Depot 3 or 4 times, but it took us 2 hours to set up the banner. But the reaction's been pretty nice, right?
They want you to believe there's too many people in the world. Bullshit! Bullshit! We need more people because human beings, human labor power is the source of all wealth. We need a government that invests in people, provides people with jobs, provides people with health care, provides people with education, and builds and constructs. Don't invest in bombs, don't invest in prisons, invest in people, human beings, and our creativity. We are the source, and we need a pro-people government. And that's what Ibrahim Traoré is on the African continent. And that's why he's teaming up with China to build power plants. And that's why he's enabled thousands of Africans to become farmers and have their own orchards and have their own fields. Behind him, we have got whole fields of wealth. That's what he's about.
I do not come to declare war, I come to declare will. So we will not kneel to fear. We will not kneel to foreign banks. We will not kneel to outdated empires masquerading as friends. Africa is not asking for a seat at your table. We are building our own, a table where no child eats last, where no nation is silenced because it lacks nuclear arms, where justice is not filtered through the lens of race or history, but shared as breath is shared. This is our vision and this is our vow. Let the world hear it today and always. Africa will not kneel.
We need a government like Ibrahim Traoré in America. That's what we need, a government of action that will fight for working families. So join us in Chicago, July 12th. Working families first, defeat the deep state for a new world of peace and innovation.
The most revolutionary thing to do, as Ibrahim Traoré is showing us, is to build. Not destroy, but build. We need to build our way out of this global crisis. We can't bomb our way out of it, right? They're trying. But the more they try, the more trouble they get their system into. They need to join the new system that is already being built. And that's the message of our conference.
Dare to struggle!
Dare to win!
Dare to struggle!
Dare to win!
Dare to struggle!
Dare to win!
All right. All right, everybody. I am glad that you're here with us. It is certainly hot in here. You know, I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt, but I don't have air conditioning in this part of the apartment. And whew, that's probably why I got a little grumpy earlier, but it's all good. It's all good. But listen, everybody, we've got a couple questions that have come in. We just hit the 2-hour mark. So why don't we do our roll call? And then I will start answering people's questions. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Who's with us? This is the roll call time. Who's with us? Names and locations. JDL 37 in Missouri. Kew Gardens, New York. Jacob in Wisconsin. St. David's, Bermuda, Seasoned Noob in China, Ian Chester in England, Rory St. Louis in Missouri, Joshua Tree, California, Kinkle, Jenny in Cincinnati, Patch in Arizona, here in Hong Kong in transit, Alyssa in Virginia, welcome Alyssa, BC in Canada, welcome BC, welcome BC. Names and locations. Dan in the LA area. See you in a few days. Yeah, I'll see you in a few days. Headed to Chicago soon. Phil Sang in Miami, Florida. California, San Bernardino. Welcome, Boris. Welcome, Boris. Brooklyn in the house. Getting stronger every day. Well, we're rooting for you. We're rooting for you, Phil. Stay strong. Zeno from the Netherlands. Very good. The Netherlands. Zeno. Welcome, Zeno. Skip. 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 Skip, skip. All right, you remember that when you had a CD and it got scratched? You know, remember back in the days of CDs? And your CD would be scratched, have a scratch on it. It would start going skip, 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 skip. I remember. I'm an old man. I'm 37. Oh, but there we go. And then people had MP3 players and iPods, and there we go. Right? There we go. You did it right. You did it right. You did it right. You still listen to CDs? Wow, you're like a caveman, Jenny. Cavewoman. You still buy CDs, Ryan? Wow. People don't even know what CDs are anymore. Nostalgia. Is buying CDs kind of like how hipsters buy vinyl records? There's whole stores in Brooklyn that sell vinyl records because it's like hipsters like them. You know, it's like really cool to have a vinyl record. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's, are you really cool, Ryan? Is that why you buy CDs? Is that like, you know, in 10 years, it'll be really cool to buy CDs, or maybe it already is. I'm just not up. I'm still talking about people buying vinyl records, but there we go. 50 cents for CDs at Swap Meet. What is Swap Meet? What is that? Is that a store, or is that like a meetup? Or there we go. That's not old. I'm going to be 53. Well, there you go, Phil. Thank you. I appreciate that. Right? I appreciate that. New CD player released. Records are kind of cool, though. Well, there you go. Right? When I was a kid, my parents had records and a record player that they had from when they were younger. And I remember I learned to operate the record player. So there you go. I actually know how to operate a vinyl record player because my parents had one and I knew how to work it. I remember that. And I actually, my parents, my father had 2 Beatles albums. He had Sgt. Pepper and he had Magical Mystery Tour. And the Beatles became kind of popular again when I was like in junior high school around like 2003, 2004. There was kind of a Beatles. I was talking about this with Ellie in Chicago. It was kind of a Beatles rollout that they did around that time. So I remember the Beatles were kind of being promoted. So I went and I got my father's copy of Sgt. Pepper, put it on the vinyl record thing, put it on there. And then for whatever reason, I don't know why, but for some reason, it was not like an old record playing machine. It was quite a new record playing machine. But regardless, the headphones were like huge. They were huge, and I couldn't listen to them too long because it would crush my ears. Right? There were these huge headphones that I put on the vinyl record player when I listened to what's it called? I talked about this with Dan too. You know, Dan is an expert on all things related to classic rock. You know, Dan knows more. And he's met the people too. Dan has like hung out with the rock stars and stuff. You know, if you come to the CPI conference, you'll meet Dan. And Dan is an awesome dude. And Dan can tell you a lot of things. We're going to start our 7-day program with CPI people. We're going to watch the movie They Live because Dan was in it briefly. He was actually in the film. And so we're going to see a classic movie. I've shown it at CPI events before, They Live, which is a great movie. And Dan was actually an extra in the movie They Live, which I think is really cool. And we're going to show the movie They Live with Dan, who was actually in the movie. Imagine that. So, yeah, wild times. But yeah. So, Dan is an awesome dude, and he will be in Chicago. So you'll get to meet him, and you'll get to meet David Fox, and it's going to be awesome, right? It's going to be great. So we do have one Rumble rant that has come in, and we have one super chat that has come in. So I'm going to give you all one more chance to send in super chats and questions. And I think I'm actually going to do something special. So there's a song that was written by Victor Jara. Victor Jara was a leader of the Chilean socialist movement who was tortured to death when Pinochet took power in Chile. He was brutally killed, but he was a popular songwriter in Chile who was very, very popular and sang popular people's songs. And probably his most famous song, it was based on a chant, right? So in Spanish, in Spanish-speaking countries, a chant that they do a lot is El Pueblo Unido jamás será vencido, which means the people united will never be defeated. And that's just a leftist chant that they do it at popular demonstrations. And so Victor Jara, the Chilean socialist folk singer, heard this chant, and he decided he was going to write a song that would go with the chant. And it's actually, this song is one of the most popular songs. The Sandinistas of Nicaragua, they sing it. They sing it in Venezuela. They sing it in Cuba. It is just one of the most popular, like, anti-imperialist movement songs of Latin America. And there are English lyrics to the song. Yeah, but I'm gonna put on a performance of El Pueblo Unido. The people united will always be defeated. And maybe if I'm feeling up for it, I will sing the English language version for you all. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling. I may, and maybe if you all send enough super chats, I'm just kidding. But no, seriously, if you all send some good questions, towards the end of the stream, I might actually sing the English language version of the song. Don't speak Spanish well enough to sing the Spanish version. But yeah, it's a great catchy tune. And this is Victor Jara's El Pueblo Unido, Amas Arabencido. The people united will never be defeated. It's a great tune. It's very inspiring. All right. So that, yeah, I told you it was a rousing song. If you never heard it before, if you ever do anything socialist or anti-imperialist in Latin America, you will hear that song. So let's see if I have the strength to sing it in English for you towards the end of the stream. We shall see. We shall see. All righty. All righty. So we have got one super chat Cash App that's come in. And then we've got a few Rumble rants that have come in, which I appreciate. So why don't we do the super chat question from Phil Sang? We'll do that one first, or Phil. Yeah, we'll do that one first. And then I will answer the Rumble rant. So he said, what is your take on Musk's new party and Musk equals fracking? I will say this, that my first thought when I saw Elon Musk supporting Thomas Massie, and I noticed that the Musk-Trump break happened right before Trump did the bullshit that he did around Iran, it appears that Donald Trump is, or I should say this, it appears that Elon Musk is more anti-Israel than we thought. That's the first thing that needs to be observed. And I'm not saying that's for good reasons necessarily. I don't know why. And he doesn't talk like he's a super pro-Palestine guy. He doesn't talk like he's super anti-Israel, but it appears that beneath the surface in his actions, if you read his actions, not his words, Elon Musk is more anti-Israel than he appears. And that's good. Okay, maybe it's not for good reasons. I don't know. I'm not in his mind. And, if you look at, his stuff around South Africa and a lot of things he says about a lot of issues, it might lead one to come to the conclusion that maybe it's for some not so good reasons, but I don't really care at this point. I mean, what Israel is doing is so horrendous, and somebody who's so rich and powerful and opposes them and will try to stop them and might have influence in the halls of power to stop them, I think that's a good thing. If he does it for bad reasons, I don't expect Elon Musk to, listen to me and go to me for advice. So, it is very possible that, that Elon Musk is anti-Israel for not so good reasons, but I don't care. And it appears that he is a lot more anti-Israel than his words are. I'm reading anti-Israel stuff into the Trump-Musk split. And the fact that he's funding Thomas Massie now, right? Thomas Massie is the most anti-Israel member of the U.S. Congress. He's a Republican from Kentucky, libertarian. He says, nope, I'm not supporting Israel. And he's solidly anti-Israel. And Thomas Massie, Donald Trump was dumping on him, and Elon Musk now started funding him. Well, that's big. Now, the fact that Elon Musk wants to form his own party. Look, Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, that is a really crappy policy, and that is Elon Musk's, that's his thing. That's his, that's his baby. And the Doge is basically taking a lot of government jobs and replacing them with AI, and it's taking a lot of spending power out of the U.S. economy, and the Doge is pretty shitty. I don't know why he's not just joining the Libertarian Party, because it seems like that's more in line with what Elon Musk believes. Elon Musk seems to be a libertarian, but I guess he wants to have his own domain, right? He wants to, and the Libertarian Party, Angela, my friend, who's a leader of it, she is the first to tell you, and, you listen to her, the Libertarian Party has big problems. There are a lot of great people in the group, but they have big problems. So maybe Elon Musk, rather than try and deal with the big problems, he just wants to start a new party. I don't quite know what exactly. He's calling it the American Party. Now, that sounds a little more nationalist or patriotic or something. But generally Elon Musk calls himself a libertarian. So we need to, if there start being American Party meetups, we need to go to them as CPI. And we need to have literature to give people there. We need to make friends, and we need to go to their events. And we have, methods of going into spaces that are, run by other political groups, right? And that's one thing we've developed at CPI. I'm not going to reveal our methods here, but, unfortunately, just because of how badly we've been smeared on the internet and stuff, we have had to learn the art of not always going in and announcing loudly who we are in order to meet people. And it's been very successful, actually, at this point. You know, I don't want to tell any stories here, but it's actually been a successful method that we have developed of going into spaces that we do not control and making friends and meeting people. You know, and it's actually been one of the main, some of our best people we've met through going into spaces we don't control. And if this America party of Elon Musk takes off, we need to dispatch our members to go to the meetings and meet people. And there will be people who join the America Party who are CPI material. I am very, very, very confident of that. I am very, very confident of that. So that's my attitude. We need to figure out how we meet people in the America Party and win them to our program of a government of action and our 4-point plan and get them to understand what CPI is all about. That's what we need to do. Won't be easy. It requires patience. But I think we can do it. And I think we're going to come out of our convention with a lot of new energy. And I think we will go into American Party events and we'll meet good people who want to change the world and don't quite fit in with the left and don't quite fit in with MAGA and Trump. And we're going to meet them and we're going to make them into innovationists. And I think that's the most important thing to come out of the America Party. But overall, I haven't studied it in depth, but I have paid quite a bit of attention to Elon Musk. My feeling is that Elon Musk is a continuation of the new right, and he represents lower levels of capital that are anti-monopoly, and that he represents a further break with big capital. Big capital is pro-Israel. Big capital is in favor of U.S. foreign policy, much more hostile to Russia. And Elon Musk represents lower level capital that doesn't buy into that. And, you know, he probably, again, it's probably a libertarian, you know, austerity program. And, you know, and it's probably, you know, very pro innovation. Elon Musk's whole image is he wants you to think he's a robber baron, that he's you know, he wants you to think he's an industrial captain, a captain of industry. He wants you to think he's Andrew Carnegie or, you know, some renegade capitalist from the 1800s who, you know, is a self-made man who just works hard. You know, he's got an image, right? When I was talking about this with Garland Nixon, he said he's Tony Stark, and that's a good way of putting it. You know, so, you know, that's obviously not what we're going for. But that said, you know, I think if that's the case, you know, we need to just figure out how we can penetrate the spaces of the American Party and meet the good people there and win them to join CPI. And we will do that. And, you know, as their politics develop, look, you know, we also need to penetrate Zohran Mamdouh's campaign in New York, which is not going to be as easy because we don't have that many people in New York these days, right? But we need to find a way that we can find the good people in Zohran Mamdouh's campaign. And we also need to figure out how we can do some political education aimed at Mamdouh supporters. That's one thing. I've got a project in the works. You know, I can't even think about it until after the convention, but I've already started thinking about a way we can intervene in the Zohran Mamdouh campaign. So we just have to intervene anywhere, right? If the door is shut, you jump through the window. If the window is shut, you crawl in through the basement window, through the cellar. You know, you always find a way to get to the masses of people, right? And whether it's a book about the Houthis, whether it's a book about Kamala Harris, that was genius. You know, I mean, I must say, so for those of you who don't know, 5 years ago, I wrote a book about Kamala Harris just because it was something to do, right? It was a way to talk to people about anti-imperialism. I learned about Kamala Harris's political background, and I said, there's a book there. It was the pandemic time, so I wrote 3 essays, and I called it, you know, Kamala Harris and the Future of America, an essay in 3 parts. I got a few interviews about it, no big deal. And then 4 years after it was published, when Kamala Harris became the nominee, the book exploded because they banned it on Amazon, and it exploded in popularity. And I was on every channel talking about it, and I was, you know, and so what did we do? Did I just keep the money and go, I made some money. I made some money, bitches. No, did I do that? No, we invested the money we raised from the book, and we did some fundraising, and we dispatched our team to go to Chicago And we distributed 1,000 copies of the book at the Democratic National Convention. We intervened at the DNC. Shout out to Ellie and Gabby and Phil and John and, our whole team, Gavin. And we distributed 1,000 copies of that book at the Democratic National Convention in order to get the message out there and spread our anti-imperialist politics. So, we intervened, right? And we got to look for every opportunity to intervene that we possibly can, right? Because we have a message that is so important and is found nowhere in American politics, and, maybe everyone's not ready for it, but that's okay. We got to find everyone who might be and win them over. So there you go. There you go. There you go. Cheers. We're doing the damn thing. Exactly. All right. So that's my initial reaction to the America Party of Elon Musk. We just got to figure out how to intervene. And I expect it to be lower levels of capital and a little bit more anti-imperialist than Trump, which, at this point, Trump has turned into a huge disappointment. So, yeah, it's not going to take much because Trump has really pivoted away from all the great things he said during his campaign. And he's really leaned into all the bad things he said during his campaign. And I have no regrets. It was correct to boost the good side of Trumpism. I have no regrets about that. But, it is disappointing to see that the good side went away. And, there you go. Now, that said, we have a couple Rumble rants that have come in. First of all, shout out to Boris, who's now a monthly supporter of this channel. Welcome, Boris, and we do appreciate that. So now Hempcar says there's a documentary with Karen Austin that fits in with Whitney Webb about the global UN agenda. Well, look, I'm not going to show a whole documentary on here. I love Whitney Webb's work. Her books about the blackmail industry and the espionage networks are fascinating. I have learned a huge amount from her writing. She's a great journalist who's exposed Jeffrey Epstein's networks and who he really served. And makes it pretty obvious who Jeffrey Epstein was working for. Whitney rocks. And I hope someday Whitney can speak at a CPI event or something. I don't know if Whitney probably needs to stay out of the United States, right? With what she's been exposing and all of that, maybe she's safer where she is. I know she doesn't live in the United States, but if someday we can host her and, give her an award for all the great journalism she's done, I would be very happy to do that. And then the next Rumble rant is Leo Messi says, Russian social conservative turn under Putin explained. From what I understand, abortion laws remain unchanged from the Khrushchev era. That's the thing. So is Russia socially conservative? By U.S. standards, it is. But, Russia, I go there. There's gay nightclubs in Russia. There's, they make a big deal in American media about the homosexual propaganda law. That is the main law that they say is proof that Russia's super, super socially conservative. And that law basically says you cannot promote homosexuality to anyone under the age of 18. So generally what that means is you can't have a gay-straight alliance in a high school. You can't have advertisements on television that promote homosexuality. And that's conservative. But also many people have pointed out to me the way that law is actually enforced. They basically it's so that the U.S. government can't fund NGOs to fund anti-government activism in Russia under the guise of the LGBT movement. They don't, go after random gay people for it, obviously. And it's not illegal to be gay in Russia. It's not illegal to be gay. Plenty of people in Russia are gay. There's gay nightclubs, there's gay scenes and all that. It's illegal to promote homosexuality to somebody under the age of 18. And generally what that means is that, that nonprofits and NGOs funded by America that are used to destabilize Russia in the name of a gay rights movement can't be funded, can't be set up. And that makes sense. You have to remember, a lot of people, this is particularly wild, but I don't know if you remember Pussy Riot. Do you remember this lesbian band that were anarchists in America, that were like lesbians who hated Putin. They're rich lesbians, and they moved to America, and they don't like Putin, and they're a rock and roll band. And they went into a church, and they disrupted a church service by playing loud, offensive rock music to get publicity for themselves. And they had been running around Russia doing all kinds of really offensive things. They'd been going into supermarkets and stripping naked and inserting food into their bodies and doing all kinds of disgusting things that they said were feminist. And the Russian government didn't arrest them because they knew it was a provocation. They knew it was designed to demonize the Russian government, that they were being funded by the U.S. State Department. Hillary Clinton was promoting them. And so this band of feminists, this feminist punk rock band was going into Russian supermarkets, middle of a supermarket. Imagine you're in a supermarket and some like women come in and start taking their clothes off and inserting different objects into themselves. And I mean, they were just doing all kinds of gross things. And the Russian government didn't arrest them because they didn't want to play into the plan. And then finally, they went into a church, a sacred space. And during a church service, they got out their rock and roll guitars and they blasted their loud punk rock music in the middle of a really important church service. And at that point, they were put in prison. And actually, that's illegal in New York City. Actually, there was a friend of mine years ago, somebody I used to know, and he was arrested for protesting at a meeting, and they charged him with the law in New York City that it is illegal to disrupt any religious service in New York City. And did you know it is actually a serious crime and it was passed. It was actually during the 80s. The ACT UP people were protesting at St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is the big, huge Catholic church downtown. The AIDS movement felt that the Catholic Church was anti-gay and was working against AIDS awareness. And so they were going regularly into St. Patrick's Cathedral and disrupting the services. And New York City passed a pretty strict law that says, look, you can protest in a building, you can protest anywhere, but you go into a church service or a synagogue or a mosque, you go into a holy place where people are exercising their religious freedom, and you disrupt. No, can't do that. And you can get jail time under that law, actually, in New York, because it's considered, and the reason that law is constitutional is it's not about your right to protest. It's about the fact that by going and disrupting that church service, you're violating everyone there's right to religious freedom. And I that makes sense to me, right? It's one thing. You go and protest a city council meeting. Okay, fine. Maybe you are creating a disturbance. You're out of order. Fine. But if you go into a church or a mosque or a synagogue where people are going and assembling to pray or to express their religion, and you go and disrupt very loudly, you're violating everyone there's right. That's not about your free speech at that point. That's a violation of everyone's rights. Now, the other thing is that in New York City, from what I understand, I did not know about this. Someone told me about this. I was quite surprised. It's a long story. I didn't know this. In New York City, in most parts of the country, if you show up at a church and they don't like you there, they say, get lost. Right? And that's just how it works. In New York City, that's not the case. In New York City, if you are a house of worship, you can't turn anyone away either, which I did not know. I'm a little bit surprised, and I'm not sure that's fair either. But, you can't disrupt a church service. That's a serious crime in New York City. But it's also not allowed if the church is having a service and you walk in, they can't be like, no, you can't come here. They can't do that, apparently, right? I did not know that. But so it goes both ways, right? In New York City, and maybe one law kind of requires the other, right? If you can't kick people out, then people better not be able to disrupt. And if people are not allowed to disrupt, I guess they're allowed to sit there respectfully. But apparently in New York City, houses of worship, they have to let you in the door, right? If they are a church or a synagogue or a mosque or a Buddhist temple or whatever, and you show up off the street, they can't be like, well, but if they're having a church service, they're incorporated legally as a church or as a place of worship, they can't turn you away. I did not know that. But if you disrupt the service, right? If you get up and shout, if you disrupt the service, that's actually a serious crime in New York. You can get jail time for it. Weird how these things work, right? And it's different in different parts of the country how these things work. But yeah, so what Pussy Riot did in Russia, that's a serious crime in New York City. You can go to jail in New York City. Now, you probably wouldn't go to jail as long. But, they went to this Orthodox church, and the Russian government had looked the other way. All these disruptions they had done, all of this. Finally, they did that. And the Russian government had to arrest them because the people of Russia are very religious. And the Russian Orthodox Church is a really, really important part of their history and culture. And these women went into the Russian Orthodox Church and really disrespected everybody. And well, there you go. They got some jail time. It was that's what happened. But I mean, as far as the abortion laws, I don't know about what the abortion laws in Russia currently are. I do know that under Stalin's leadership, abortion was outlawed. And it's very interesting because Trotsky talks about that in his book, Revolution Betrayed. He has a chapter called Thermidor in the Family. And it was about how, it's funny because Trotsky is in favor of abortion being legal and he's attacking Stalin for outlawing abortion, but he actually tells the context, which is fascinating to me. So when the Bolsheviks took power, they legalized abortion because they were socially liberal. And I guess abortion was happening. And then when Stalin was in power, they really tried to increase the population rate. And so they had a special medal called Mother of the Soviet Union. If you had more than 10 kids, you got one of the highest medals, which was Mother of the Soviet Union, which was it was a high medal because you had 10 children because they needed more workers, more people to have more wealth. They were trying to increase the population, 5-year economic plans. A lot of people had died in World War I and the Russian Civil War and all of that. So they're trying to increase the population. And at the same time they were doing that, apparently in the countryside, there were women who were giving themselves abortions with herbs, right? There were women who were eating herbs that would cause your fetus to die. And that's apparently very, very dangerous, right? And it was a problem that women would, get pregnant. And then rather than going and getting an abortion from a doctor, they would go and eat certain berries or eat certain plants and give themselves an abortion. And there were women dying from doing this. And it was actually kind of a threat to public health. And at that point, they were setting up, the country was at that point starting to have a modern medical system, but it was new, right? They were building new hospitals all over the country, et cetera. They were building new hospitals and stuff. And so, as you're building a medical system in a country, is your priority going to be abortion? Obviously not, right? Your priority is going to be, general practitioners, surgery, maybe inoculations. I don't know. So, they're not at the point where they can just provide abortion to every woman who wants one. And then women were taking, were giving themselves abortion with herbs in a way that was quite dangerous. So as a result, the Soviet government started discussing banning abortion. And at the time that Trotsky wrote his History of the Russian Revolution, they hadn't fully decided to do it. But there was a call from many leaders of the Communist Party to outlaw abortion. And then finally, a couple years after, they finally did go along and outlaw abortion. And abortion was illegal. And then when Khrushchev came to power, this is very interesting. So Stalin, weird facts, no Russian leader has ever built as many Orthodox churches as Stalin. Right? Stalin was an atheist, but after World War II, Stalin went on a church building binge. And after World War II, as they were rebuilding the country, they had brought the church back during the war. And after World War II, Stalin built hundreds and thousands of Russian Orthodox churches all across the USSR. And from the time of World War II until Stalin's death, the Russian Orthodox Church flourished. When Stalin died, Khrushchev came into power, And Khrushchev launched a big crackdown on the Russian Orthodox Church, and a number of priests were arrested for allegedly being spies. And it's weird because they were implementing de-Stalinization. That was what Khrushchev called it. And you would think de-Stalinization would be more freedom. But for some reason, de-Stalinization went along with a big crackdown on religious freedom. And as a result of that, there was suppression of religion under Khrushchev. And my understanding is that under Khrushchev, abortion became legal in the USSR and was actually very, very common, right? And that there was I've heard statistics about many women in the USSR having 1 or 2 abortions or something like that. And I don't know if that's true necessarily, or that's just kind of propaganda intended to fire up American Christians to hate the Soviet Union or whatever. But I know there was widespread practice of abortion in the 1960s in the Soviet Union. And I don't quite understand why, but I do know it was outlawed in the early 30s by Stalin's government under those unique circumstances, and that Khrushchev legalized it, and it was considered in the early 60s to be very excessive. And I have no idea what Russia's abortion laws are now. I have absolutely no idea what they are. That's just, when I go over there, I don't ask, hey, can I get an abortion? I don't do that for obvious reasons. I'm a man. So I have no idea what the Russian abortion laws are now, but I know that history because I've studied that politics. And I think it's interesting. The other thing that is interesting is, in Mao's China, abortion, right? So Maoists will tell you that Mao legalized abortion. And Edgar Snow, his last book, Edgar Snow is the great American journalist, was the first and last person to interview Mao Zedong. His book, The Long Revolution, which was published after his death, it was about his final trip to China, his final interview with Mao. And he died before it was actually published. There's a chapter called Abortion with Acupuncture. And it's about how when he went to China in 1973 or 74, he went and watched an abortion. And there was a woman who had an abortion, and the only anesthesia she needed was acupuncture. That Mao was promoting acupuncture because it was traditional Chinese medicine. And there was a woman who has an abortion with acupuncture. And Maoist communists tend to be real big feminists. And they also tend to be, they tend to believe what Edgar Snow said. They tend to be leftists. And so generally Maoist communists believe that Mao was all about abortion. That's actually not completely true. And in fact, during the Cultural Revolution in China, they were trying to increase the population. And Mao was really encouraging families to have more than one child. They were doing a similar thing to what Stalin did, which was they were trying to increase the birth rate. And so abortion was technically legal, but abortion clinics were shut down largely because they were considered to be anti-party, because the party was trying to increase the birth rate. This is very interesting. The Cultural Revolution in China was like mob rule, right? It wasn't like there was a set of rules that everyone had to follow. Instead, there were mobs of people like Red Guards, teenagers, who were going around enforcing whatever they thought was Mao's revolutionary line. And abortion clinics existed, but mobs of Red Guards would come and smash the windows and declare them to be anti-communist because they wanted the population to go up. And that's very interesting, right? So there are actually anti-communist books about a woman trying to get, there's some anti-communist book about a woman in China trying to get an abortion, and she can't get one because the Cultural Revolution is going around, the Red Guards have shut down all the abortion clinics, and she knows that if she gets her abortion, she'll be denounced as an anti-communist, and she'll be given a public struggle session, and she'll be publicly humiliated. And it's funny because a lot of the Maoists, they think, Mao must have loved abortion. And I guess in the Edgar Snow book, apparently they were so into abortion, they let Edgar Snow watch one. So I don't, apparently it was not consistent. And that's interesting. The other thing was, and this is something I'll throw out there, is that, China admits that during the Cultural Revolution, there was horrendous repression of religious people, right? Even though it was legal to be Catholic or Protestant or to be a Christian, it was legal to be a Muslim, it was legal to be a Buddhist. That was legal. But during the Cultural Revolution, again, it was kind of mob rule, and the mobs of young radical communists, the Red Guards, would go after anyone they thought was anti-communist. So one thing that you'll hear, and this is very interesting, right, is Tibet separatists will say they say Mao did it as if Mao personally did it, which that's not what happened. But they say, well, Mao forced Tibetan monks who had vows of chastity to have sex. Now, that's not what happened. What happened was that religious people in general were held in suspicion because religion was considered to be anti-communist, and they were harassed, and that Catholic priests and nuns and and Buddhist monks and others who for religious reasons had taken on a life of celibacy were declared to be anti-party and anti-communist because the Communist Party wanted to increase the birth rate. And so there were many Catholic priests living in China who were basically forced by mobs to get married. They were basically told that by not getting married, you're against the party, you're against communism. And so mobs of people would basically force them to get married. And the same thing was done to Tibetan monks who had done that. And it wasn't an anti-Tibetan policy. It had nothing to do with Tibetanism. It just had to do with the Cultural Revolution. They were trying to eradicate anything that they thought was anti-communist. And China has since really apologized and said that, look, during the Cultural Revolution, we were horrendous the way we treated religious people. It was absolutely, absolutely horrendous. So that's kind of interesting. But the Tibet separatists, you always got to watch the Tibet separatists because they take things that happened in all of China and they make it sound like it only happened in Tibet and it was Han Chinese oppressing the Tibetan nation. That's bullshit. And in fact, most of the things that Tibet separatists blame on China were done by other Tibetans. Who were the biggest victims of the Dalai Lama? The Tibetan people, the serfs. Go and read Anna Louise Strong. She wrote a great book, When the Serfs Stood Up in Tibet, right? And I will link that book. One of my favorite writers, Anna Louise Strong, When the Serfs Stood Up in Tibet. And this is a whole book. You can read it for free online. And in the book, she talks about how it was the Tibetan peasantry, the serfs, right? That, they were the ones that were oppressed by the Dalai Lama and his brutal feudal regime. And the Communist Party gave those people permission to break their chains and to stop being slaves. And go and read When the Serfs Stood Up in Tibet. And you'll read that, and they'll talk about, oh my God, they burned the Buddhist temples. They did. And, and then the monks who lived in luxury while the people were living in poverty were persecuted. That's true. And I mean, I am not in favor of vengeance and, I'm not saying it was right, but the people doing it were other Tibetans who were tired of that shit. They were peasant Tibetans who were slaves basically, and were breaking their chains. And you won't ever hear that, right? They make it sound like, a bunch of Chinese people showed up in Tibet and made it happen. And it's like, no, actually, it was Tibetans who were empowered by Mao and others to not be slaves anymore. And in some cases took some pretty brutal revenge on their oppressors. One person who was there and witnessed it was W.E.B. Du Bois, the most famous African-American scholar. And he went to Tibet and he was there and he saw the whole thing. And he said it was slaves breaking their chains. He compared it to what Abraham Lincoln did in the South. He compared it to Reconstruction, right? W.E.B. Du Bois, one of his most famous books, one of his most famous books is called, Black Reconstruction. He was an expert on the struggle against slavery in America. And he said in Tibet, it was Reconstruction. It was the slaves breaking their chains. And read what he wrote, W.B. Du Bois, and read what Anna Louise Strong wrote about it, right? So go read When the Serfs Stood Up in Tibet. It's a great, great book, When the Serfs Stood Up in Tibet. Anna Louise Strong, anything that she wrote is great. I really admire Anna Louise Strong. So you're asking me, about that. Now, I guess, is that, oh no, there's another one. Is there a charge for the convention in Chicago next week? No, there is not. It is free, but you have to register. There is registration at the door, right? For security, there's security procedures, but it's free. It's free. We may have a donation bucket at the registration table because there's some financial concerns right now. I'm trying to scrape everything together to make sure we get through the weekend. We aren't sure if we're going to put a donation bucket at the door, but no one's going to be turned away. It is free to get in, but you have to go through registration. You can't just walk in off the street, right? I mean, you'd have to show up, and sign in basically, and there's security that's going to be there. That's fine. We protect our people. We don't want, crazy hooligans coming in, and stuff like that. We have security procedures in place, but it's free. It's free. It's free. It is free. It is a free event. We may have a donation bucket at the registration table, just because, that might help us, but we'll see. Again, we could really use some donations, right? If you can donate, not you in particular, Kinkle, but anybody, if anyone can send us a donation to the GoFundMe, that would make my life a little less stressful. We don't have an issue with having the money. We have an issue with cash flow, right? You have to have all the money in the right spot at the right time. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm juggling here and juggling there. And I think we're going to be fine, but oh boy, that's how these things work, right? Look, logistics. I will say it's going to be way easier the next time we do one of these. I finally discovered, I don't want to get into details, but next time we do one of these, it's going to be about 10 times easier, which is good. And so after this convention, we're going to see how it goes. We're going to, do an assessment, and then we're going to set the date for the next one. But I will say that much. Next time we do one of these, it's going to be 10 times easier because I made a great tactical discovery. Look, organizing is not easy. Talking on the internet like I'm doing right now is easy, but organizing, keeping everyone together, making sure all the different moving parts are in the same place is very difficult. The movie Wag the Dog, right, it's a great movie with Dustin Hoffman. I rewatched it a couple weeks ago. It's a comedy, but it's about how U.S. media is propaganda for the military, and it's brilliant. And the movie is about, basically, there's a president who's being reelected, and he has a sex scandal. And so then in order to win the election, they fake a war, and they hire a Hollywood producer to fake the war so that he's popular, rally around the flag effect, he wins the election. It's a comedy. It's brilliant. It's got Dustin Hoffman. It's got Woody Harrelson. It's a brilliant film. Funny, and it's very, very much shows how mainstream media is a shill for the military and how, propaganda. It's brilliant. The main character in the film is this Hollywood producer who they hire to fake the war. And the Hollywood producer is like the greatest producer in Hollywood, but he's never won an Oscar because there's no Oscar for producing. And he talks about what it means to be a producer a lot in the film. And he talks about how the producer, right, and this is true in television and in film, the producer, if they do their job right, nobody knows they exist. Nobody knows they exist because they don't do anything. They just make all the moving parts come together. It's very interesting. The producer, they don't write the script. The writer does. They don't direct it. The director does. They don't film it. The camera guy does. They don't act in it. The actors do. The producers just bring all the moving parts together and let them do their work. And if they do their job right, everyone's just like, who's the producer? They don't even know who the producer is, right? Everything just happens. However, if something goes wrong, if the actor isn't there, if the script isn't written, if the director doesn't have the right instructions, then everyone blames the producer. And now, I mean, basically being a producer is a really hard job because it's thankless. No one says thank you because they don't understand that, everyone sees the writer writing and they say, what a great writer. They see the director directing. They say, what a great director. They see the actor acting. What a great actor. But the producer is the person who brings them all together and makes it happen. And the producer is the unsung hero. And often the producer has to solve problems. And that's what the movie kind of gets into. Like the producer something goes wrong, the producer has to solve the problem. And that's kind of the comedy of the movie, is things keep going wrong. As they're faking this war, things keep going wrong, and the producer has to solve the problem. It's pretty brilliant, right? And it gets more absurd as the movie keeps going on. It's not just that they're faking a war. I don't want to give it away if you haven't seen it. Go and watch it. You can watch it on YouTube for $2.99 or whatever. It's a really funny movie. It's really, really funny, and it gets more and more absurd as the movie goes on, and it caricatures war propaganda, like from the 90s, from the Gulf War era, and from like Bill Clinton and his bombing of Serbia and stuff. It's really funny. It makes fun of American war propaganda and American mass media. And it also, the plot is absurd. They're faking a war that isn't happening. And the war gets more and more crazy, as the movie goes on. What's interesting is it's very similar in plot structure to a movie that Michael Moore made called Canadian Bacon. That's the only movie that Michael Moore ever made that was a straight movie, that wasn't a documentary. And I must say, Michael Moore, now I can't even listen to the man. He's gone woke, and he's just completely, gone down the drain. I enjoyed him during the Bush years. I didn't like Fahrenheit 9/11, but I did like Bowling for Columbine, and I really liked the movie Sicko. And, one of my roommates is in Capitalism, A Love Story. And, there's a number of people I know that are actually in that movie, because I was doing activism and I was in the right place at the right time. But I didn't get filmed, but my roommate did. He was in Capitalism, A Love Story. So it's like, I can't really, it's a decent film. It's okay. It's, and I guess Richard Wolff wrote a lot of it, from what I understand. He was he was one of the main people working on that film. Michael Moore did decent work until Trump, right? And then, he was, during the Obama years, he was starting to lose the plot, and then he just completely lost the plot, with Trump. He just completely lost the plot, and I don't even know what he's doing. He made a Malthusian film that was anti-growth called Planet of the Humans, that it was good in that it kind of made fun of the green industry, he showed that a lot of, environmental stuff is a ripoff, and it doesn't really help the environment. And then from there, it just turned into a Malthusian rant against economic growth. I don't know. Michael Moore, he lost the plot. Once Trump was a factor, he lost the plot. But yeah, I enjoyed some of his work. I will say Canadian Bacon is not that funny, right? It's similar in plot structure. It's a similar idea to Wag the Dog, right? In Michael Moore's film, the president decides to go to war with Canada because he's losing popularity, and it's an actual war, right? It's kind of like they have an actual war with Canada, or whatever. But it's because the president's losing popularity. But I will say Canadian Bacon is not as funny as Wag the Dog. Wag the Dog is way funnier than Canadian Bacon. Canadian Bacon's okay. There's a couple like laugh lines in the movie. There's a couple funny gags in the movie that are making fun of Canadians, Canadian culture a little bit, but it's a little bit too preachy. There's a lot of like long speeches in the movie where he's trying to get political points in and stuff like that. And my feeling is that, Roger and Me was a decent film as well. That was his first movie. I'm just throwing this out there, right? So I know a lot more of Michael Moore's backstory than most people do, because I was in the Workers' World Party, and they have a very strong, or used to, they kicked them out. They had a very strong branch in Detroit for many years, in Michigan. And from what I was told, Michael Moore's parents were in the Communist Party USA. They were CPUSA members. They left over the Khrushchev revelations, which, it was a big defining moment in the history of global communism. 1956, after Khrushchev gave the secret speech, they quit the Communist Party. And the Communist Party back then had rules that you could not have hire and fire power and be in the Communist Party, because they were a workers' party, right? So you couldn't be a boss, you couldn't be a manager and be in the Communist Party. And so after his parents quit the Communist Party, they both worked at General Motors, but then they quit the Communist Party. They figured, okay, we'll move up. And I guess they both had college education. So they actually became well-paid employees of General Motors. They became management at General Motors. They became, managers. And Michael Moore didn't grow up in Flint. He actually grew up in kind of a wealthier suburb of Flint, Michigan. That's where he's from. And he was like a young activist in the 70s. And he had a radio show. And he had the alternative newspaper. In Cleveland, they had Cleveland Scene. In New York City, they have the Village Voice. Most major cities, they have what's called the alternative newspaper. In Flint, Michigan, it was called Flint Voice, and Michael Moore was the editor of it. And he was a leftist, right? And he always makes a big deal that he's from a Catholic family. And that makes sense because in the 80s, right? Early 80s, that was kind of when he was starting to ascend. And in the early 80s, what they called the Catholic left was really surging. Liberation theology, solidarity with Latin America, opposition to nuclear weapons and nuclear power. That's where Dennis Kucinich had been the mayor of Cleveland in the 70s and had been not very successful. And then he left politics, and then he got involved with the Catholic left, and he started doing protests against nuclear power plants. That's how Dennis Kucinich became a member of the U.S. Congress. And in the 80s, what they called the Catholic left, the liberation theology left, that was very much involved with supporting the Sandinistas of Nicaragua, and was very much, peace-oriented, anti-nuclear weapons, etc., were surging. And those were kind of the circles that Michael Moore, as an Irish American, right? He's Irish, Irish Catholic. He ran in those circles, but he was not anti-communist. And I guess he was the editor of the Flint Voice, and he did a pretty good job with the Flint Voice. Their readership went up. So he ended up getting hired as the editor of The Nation, right? And this is interesting to me. The Nation is like a very liberal leftist magazine, which still runs good stuff. I know their publisher prints Max Blumenthal's books. Max Blumenthal is very anti-imperialist. And they will run, The Nation runs decent stuff. Their Mother Jones magazine has really just turned into a woke, rag. I mean, it's just awful. But The Nation still does decent stuff. And he was the editor of The Nation. And I guess The Nation wanted to run a hit piece on the Sandinistas of Nicaragua, all right, accusing the Sandinistas of violating human rights. He refused to publish it because he said he didn't want Ronald Reagan to be able to say The Nation agreed with him and use The Nation to justify sending weapons to the Contras. I mean, that's decent. And it was in the 80s when they were closing the factory in Flint, Michigan, that he spent years making this movie called Roger and Me, which is quite a good movie. It's depressing, but it's basically about Flint, the General Motors plant closes down and it destroys all kinds of working people's lives. And one guy, goes into a mental hospital, because he doesn't know how he's going to feed his kids. And he has like a psychological breakdown, and it shows like a family getting evicted from their home on Christmas Eve. And it's a really powerful film showing about how this greedy corporation that wanted to pay poverty wages in Mexico closed down the factory and destroyed the lives of thousands of people and basically destroyed this city called Flint, Michigan, and just destroyed it. It's a great movie. It's sad. It's depressing, but it's pro-labor, pro-union, and it shows the big corporations and how they hurt the American working class. It's populist. It's for the working class. It's some good stuff. It's decent. And it's a well-made film. It's funny. It's got a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of like funny, it's got a sense of humor and all. It's a decent film. So my understanding is that at the time he made that movie, and it took him years, he was going around all over Michigan filming any protests supporting the auto workers, and that he did a lot of he recorded a lot of communist rallies, but he just didn't put that in the movie. And that was one thing that the Workers' World Party people, they had a criticism of the movie Roger and Me, is they said, where was the good guys? You made a movie, but you only showed the bad guys. You showed all the bad things the bad guys did, and you showed, but you didn't show the fight back, you know, because the Workers' World Party had organized this campaign called "A Job is a Right," and they had gotten thousands and thousands of workers to go to these demonstrations saying a job is a right. You know, and they had, you know, had petitions to nationalize the factories that were being closed down and put them under public ownership. And, you know, and that was left out of the film. It was like they showed the bad, but they didn't show the resistance of the people. And that was their criticism. But apparently on his radio show in Flint, Michigan, he would have Workers' World members come on to defend the Soviet Union. And, you know, he was just this leftist guy in Michigan. And also it's important to note, Michigan is unique politically, right? And I spent a fair amount of time in Detroit, you know, and it's not like any other city because, you know, Detroit used to be called Motor City, and the United Auto Workers ran the town. You know, they had a lot of power, and the UAW was a pretty left-wing labor union. Now, they banned the communists in the 50s, but it was run by Social Democrats and Trotskyites. You know, the Reuther brothers, Walter and Victor Reuther, you know, they called for national health care. They were members of the Socialist Party. And the UAW bankrolled Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? The I Have a Dream speech was given at a rally in Washington, D.C., and it was the March for Jobs and Freedom, and that was all paid for by the United Auto Workers. And the UAW, you know, they're the ones that paid for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, and the UAW, of all the labor unions in America, it was a union that was basically started by communists. There's actually a really good book about the communists who started the UAW. There's two really good books, actually. But the auto industry, that was where the Communist Party really had a lot of power. One of the books is called Brother Bill McKay. It's a very, very good biography of the communist labor unionist Bill McKay, who led to Ford Motor Company being unionized. And I can't see I don't know where my copy of that book is, but it's called Brother Bill McKay. And then this book is very, very good. It's called Communists and the Communist Party and the Auto Workers Union by Roger Kieran. This is a really, really good book. And it was the Communist Party that did the Flint sit-down strike. And it was the Communist Party that you know, unionized the auto industry in America. They always talk about the auto workers in America had such good wages. That was because it was communists. I mean, it was communists who led the auto workers unions. And, you know, Bill McKay was an immigrant from Scotland who was a communist. And he, you know, was the guy who unionized Ford Motor Company. Very heroic, self-sacrificing individual. There was Homer Martin, was another leader of the Auto Workers Union. You know, Wyndham Mortimer, right, was another guy. And there was it wasn't just the Communist Party, right? There was the followers of J. Lovestone were like the Communist Party's arch rival, the Lovestoneites. There were Trotskyites, the SWP, they had a faction. There was actually a communist group in Michigan in those years called the Proletarian Party, which it's kind of obscure, but it was a big communist group in Michigan only, called the Proletarian Party. Yeah, it was communists that created the UAW. And because of that, Detroit has kind of a unique political atmosphere. You know, for example, when I was in Detroit, the mayor of Detroit was Kenneth Cockrell Jr. And he was just a regular Democrat, but he won the election. He was popular because his dad was a communist lawyer. His father was Ken Cockrell, the communist lawyer who was the leader of the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, DRUM. And, you know, it wasn't just one generation, right? In the 30s, the Communist Party ran the UAW. The UAW had a lot of influence and they were very, very powerful. And then in the 60s and 70s, there was DRUM, right? You know, so, you know, the Communist Party organized a lot of people, and organized the United Auto Workers Union. But there were barely any black people who worked in the auto plants. And during the Flint sit-down strike, in 1937, there was only one black worker in the factory, and he was a janitor. They wouldn't allow black workers to work on the line. And when the workers occupied the factory, when they marched out victorious as an anti-racist statement, they actually had the only black auto worker in the plant carry the American flag to make a political statement, to be like, we're against racism. And it was the Black Legion, which was a fascist group. It was like the KKK, except they wore black hoods instead of white hoods, and they allowed Catholics. They are the ones that tried to break the strike. So it's very interesting, right? And the Black Legion killed Malcolm X's father. Malcolm X's father was murdered by the Black Legion. And the Black Legion was just this fascist group in Michigan at the time, that they were Catholic, the Catholic clan, basically. And they took inspiration from Father Coughlin, the fascist radio priest, and they tried to break the strike. And they failed. It was, and then after they unionized the plant, the Communist Party wanted black workers to be hired. But it really wasn't until the riots that followed the death of Martin Luther King Jr. that they started hiring black people to work in the auto plants. Right. And it was after the huge wave of rebellions that happened in many major cities after the death of Martin Luther King Jr., that the auto plants started hiring black people. And that was because of the fact that it was considered like it was basically, a way to ease unrest. Instead of having black people rioting out in the streets, let's hire some of them to work in the factories. But they faced a lot of discrimination. So there was a faction of the UAW that was the black faction of the United Auto Workers. And it was called DRUM, the Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement. And there's a book on the history of DRUM that is very good. And I think I have a copy of it somewhere. It's called Detroit, I Do Mind Dying. And they were basically, it was black auto workers, and they became Maoist communists. Because, the Black Liberation Movement, the Black Panthers, and they were auto workers, and they became Maoist communists. And they had a lot of power in Detroit. And, their leader was a guy named Ken Cockrell, who was a black lawyer. When I lived in Detroit, his son was the mayor, and he was wildly popular. And everyone said, "Oh, I remember your dad from the 70s, right?" They remembered his father was this lawyer who fought for black people, fought for working people, and was a Maoist communist. And, they elected a communist judge in Detroit in the 70s, and he had like Mao's little red book on the bench. And, he jailed stores that served rotten meat. I guess there were a lot of like stores that served people rotten meat and made them sick. And they usually just got a fine. And he actually jailed, people for serving rotten meat and making people sick. And it was Detroit was probably the only place in America that the 1970s new communist movement gained a foothold, right? Really the only place. There's like a whole film about DRUM, about the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement that you can watch on YouTube. It's called Finally Got the News. And there's a clip from that film that's Ken Cockrell, just kind of giving his political perspective. And I've put that on this YouTube channel. Might as well show that now. I'll show this clip of Ken Cockrell, because Ken Cockrell was kind of the leader of DRUM, the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement. And he was a Maoist communist, and he was a hardline communist lawyer. And so, I'm going to show Ken Cockrell. I'm going to show the clip from that movie where Ken Cockrell, I'm going to show that. Why not? Right? Why not? All right. Right. All right. Where is it? I just got to find the clip, right? It's one of the first clips. I put it on like just after I started this YouTube channel. It's a great clip, but I just got to find it. So I just got to find the clip. Just got to find the clip. Just got to find the clip. Hold on. I've just got to find the clip. Why is YouTube being slow? I have the clip saved. But anyway, all right. Right, we're going to find the clip. Hold on. Hold on. If I could do it again, I would word the title a little bit more so I can remember it, because I've shown it on these streams before. It's a great clip from this documentary film that was made at the time that the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement existed, and I will show this clip. Also, when I was, Ohio is where I had my political start, and Ohio is very close to Michigan, and so, I know this stuff a little better than I know other stuff, but yeah, let me find the clip. Just trying to find the clip. Just trying to find the clip. Hold on. Hold on. Let me find this clip of Ken Cockrell, because it's a good clip. I mean, it's agitation. He does use four-letter words a bit, but that's kind of the 1960s style, right? Is that nowadays people use four-letter words too, but I mean, there's obviously it's something people do, and there's nothing wrong with it. I was just at the post office. Hilariously, they had a sign. Here we go. All right, found it. All right, but they had a sign at the post office, and it said, "No bikes, no rollerblades, and no swearing, no profanity." And I thought, that's odd. Like, so if I say the F-bomb, are they going to tell me I can't mail my package? But there you go. All right. Here's the clip. This is Ken Cockrell, the leader of the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement.
You little bullshit amounts of money for working, wages and so forth, and then they steal all that shit back from you in terms of the way he got his other things set up. His whole credit gimmick society, man, consumer credit, buy shit on credit. He give you a little bit of shit to cool your ass out, and then steal all that shit back with shit called interest, the price of money. Motherfuckers in non-producing, non-existent, industries, motherfuckers who deal with paper. There's a cat who will stand up and say to you, he's in mining. And he sits in an office, man, on the 199th floor in some motherfucking building on Wall Street, and he's in mining. And he has paper, certificates, which are embroidered and shit, stocks, bonds, debentures, obligations, he's in mining. And he's sitting up in Wall Street, and his fingernails ain't been dirty in his motherfucking life. He went to Phillips, Andover, or Exeter. He went to Harvard. He went to Yale. He went to the Wharton School of Business, and he's in mining. And the motherfuckers who deal with intangibles are the motherfuckers who are rewarded in this society. The more abstract and intangible your shit is. Hey, stocks. What is stocks? A stock certificate is evidence of ownership in something that's real. Ownership. He owns and controls and therefore receives, the benefit from. That's what they call profit. He fucking with shit in Bolivia. He fucking with shit in Chile. He's Kennecott. He's Anaconda. He's United Fruit. He's in mining. He's in what? He ain't never in his life produced shit. Investment bankers, stock brokers, insurance men. It's motherfuckers who don't do nothing. We see that this whole society, man, exists and rests upon workers, and that this whole motherfucking society controlled by this ruling clique is parasitic, vulturistic, cannibalistic, and is sucking and destroying, man, the life of motherfucking workers, and we have to stop it because it's evil.
There's a lot of confusion amongst white people in this country, amongst white workers in this country about who the enemy is. The same contradictions of overproduction, the same contradictions of increasing production are prevalent within the white working class. But because of the immense resources of propaganda, publicity, radio, television, journals, magazines, and so on and so forth, which can be drawn upon, white people tend to get a little bit confused about who the enemy is. If you take a look at, white workers in Flint, for instance, in the automobile industry, who are pretty hard pressed because the Buick plant up there is whipping their ass. And it's whipping their ass about twice as hard today as it was 5 years ago. But who do they think the enemy is? The nigga on the street. Crime in the streets, was the problem. Or black people, moving into our neighborhood, causing housing prices to decline and threatening to rape our wives and daughters, And as a result, you get a cat like George Wallace who comes along. And George Wallace is not the first of the populist fascists in this country. And George Wallace talks about how the big fat cats of Wall Street are messing up the country. It's the little man that's suffering because of, the big, rich financial bears of Wall Street in conjunction and in alliance with the niggers. And the white folks, the white workers tend to buy that shit up. They tend to eat it up. They tend to love it. That's not in Birmingham, Alabama that I'm talking about. That's in Flint, Michigan. As a result of that kind of thing, millions and millions of white workers in this country just don't understand what's going down and end up becoming counter-revolutionary, even though the contradictions which they face every day would say that they should be the most staunch revolutionaries. Black people represent, the most forward and progressive and militant movement inside the plant, which are calling not for, in reality, they ain't calling for the destruction, of, the white working class. The demands which are being presented, are demands which are calling for an uplifting of the working class as a whole. And the actual fact of the matter is that the movement of black workers is a class movement that's calling for a total change in the relationship between workers and owners altogether. And what it's saying is that certainly we don't want all the shitty and lowest paying jobs in the plant. Certainly we don't want to be, most exploited people in the plant. And we aren't calling for anybody to be exploited. We're calling for the elimination of exploitation in the plants. We're calling for the elimination of racism in the plants. We're calling for the elimination of any kind of conditions inside of the plant, which are bad, for the basic, health and enjoyment, of life. We are not calling for the replacement of the black proletariat, with workers, who happen to be in a higher stage on the ladder. We are not calling for a situation in which white oppressors will be replaced by black oppressors. We are calling for the ending of oppression altogether. Basically the reason that they're racist is because of the fact that they're afraid, that the little bit of niche that they got in society is going to be lost. But ain't nobody been trying to demonstrate to them that rather than being against the black movement and being enemies of the black movement, that they should be in favor of the black movement and supporters of the black movement, because the things that the black movement is doing inside of industry are basically in their interests. The kinds of demands and the kinds of movements, which black people are making inside of the plants are not inimical to the interests of the average white worker.
All righty. So there we go. There we go. That's a great clip. That's a great clip. Dare to struggle, dare to win. We are having a really important event coming up. It's going to be really, really, really great. I hope to see you all there. Shout out to our CPI brothers and sisters. They're going to be out in the streets of Chicago doing outreach today, or tomorrow. I should say today because it's after midnight, but they're going to be out in the street, at the July 4th parade doing outreach. And, we got 1,000 more of those door hanger flyers to get out. So on that note, I'm thinking at this point, we don't have any more Rumble rants, and, we don't have any more super chats that have come in. That's not me. That's not me. You think that's me? Larry came late. He thought that was me in the clip. Yeah, that was a clip of Ken Cockrell from the movie Finally Got the News, 1970s movie. But Larry said, "Caleb, buddy, you sounded like you smoked a fatty in that clip." Well, who knows? I've never actually smoked marijuana. So maybe if I smoked marijuana, I would sound like that. I'd be like, "Hey, cats, motherfucker." I don't know. But yeah, that was Kenneth Cockrell. So there you go. There you go. But It's wild. Well, listen, folks, if you got any more questions for us, please do. I am going to put on the promotional video for the conference because I've got a little more energy in me. If you got any more questions, I'm going to put on the promotional videos. And then after that, I'll answer any more questions folks got. And then if there's no more questions, we'll probably end it. We're well over 3 hours in, which is fine. Hey, dare to struggle, dare to win. So anyway, please send a donation for the conference. We would appreciate it. And here's a video about that. Friends, how you doing today? I'm letting you know, the Center for Political Innovation, we are about to do, on July 12th, the biggest event that we have ever done. It will be our national gathering in Chicago on July 12th. And it's going to be really, really special. We are talking with a number of important anti-imperialist voices, a lot of different communities. There's going to be musical performances, dance performances, there's going to be great speeches, and it's going to be a whole day gathering dedicated to anti-imperialism. I am committed, and CPI has always been committed to building an in real life network of people. And we carry out real operations. We were at the inauguration of Trump with our Trump and Kim banner saying only peace can make America great again. We were on the streets of Chicago at the Democratic National Convention with a book exposing what Kamala Harris and who she really is and what she's really about, and it was really, really important. We have 1,000 copies of our book about the Houthis that are being distributed with the poster of the convention on the back to people who would never go looking for this. We are putting door hanger flyers on doors of people, again, that would never go looking for this. We're not performing and trying to make ourselves feel good. We're actually trying to build a network of people that can be anti-imperialists in America. And it's not easy to do. It's very difficult in these times to build a real in-life organization. People have their issues. We live in a very strange time, but we have to do it. And we are committed to continuing this project. This video is basically me telling you we need your support. In order to pull off our convention that includes our 7-day program for our members around the country to come to Chicago, includes our huge convention on July 12th, where we're gonna fill up the Midwest Convention Center, in order to have an effective national planning meeting and gathering in Chicago the day after on July 13th. In order to do what we need to do, we need to fill up that auditorium and we need money. And there's really no way around that. We need you to donate to the Center for Political Innovation. We have set up a GoFundMe, and a lot of people have already contributed. We already raised a couple $1,000, but it's not enough. In order to really pull off our July activities and really have a win for anti-imperialism, we need your support. We need you to go to the GoFundMe right now and donate $5 or $20. We need you to go to the donate button on the CPI website and send us $100 or $50, whatever you can do. If we're gonna do what we need to do in July and build the organization and have the mega anti-imperialist rally that needs to happen on July 12th and solidify the network that we're building to continue to carry out the great operations that we do, we need you to help us out. Every cent that we raise goes into building this group. I'm lucky I have a paycheck with everything that's going on. I'm surviving, and I have consistently put a huge amount of the money that I have, my own resources, my own funds, into CPI because I believe in it, because it needs to happen, because this organization is necessary. I'm looking at what I've got and my own resources and my own bills and all of that, and I'm looking at what's already been paid for, and it's not enough. I mean, it's just not enough. I can't just pay for everything myself. We have membership dues and other things, but we need a special gift. We need a special gift to make July happen. We need you to give us a special contribution so that we can make sure the July events go smoothly, that the housing for the people coming in out of town is covered, that the speakers that are being flown in, their airfare is properly covered. We need you to make a special one-time gift to make this July gathering, this anti-imperialist summit that we are organizing. We need you to help us make it happen and help us make it a success. Small gift, big gift, whatever you can do. We need you to help us with it. But you know what? I'll just say this. If it's a matter of send us a gift or come, we'd rather you come. We'd rather you be there. It's much more important that you be there on July 12th. If you can't afford to give us a gift, but you can afford to come to town If there's one event that you come to this year, make it July 12th. CPI, Center for Political Innovation, we're doing something that nobody else is doing, and we're doing it right. We're not doing it in a way that we're trying to win the internet. We're not doing it in a way that we're trying to make ourselves feel special or act like we're cool. We're building what needs to be built. We are building the real connections. And if you can understand why what we're doing is so important, if you can understand why anti-imperialism is the future, but we have to break out of the narrow niche circles and internet culture and get to the masses of people with real outreach. If you can understand that, please give us a gift. We're trying to build an actual movement to win new people to anti-imperialism and continue to carry out operations to change the conversation in America so that we have a country where there's a mass movement demanding justice for working families and an end to these wars, that we're saying no to World War III, we're saying no to the emerging low-wage police state. That's what we urgently need. So if you can help us in any way, send us a gift. If you can be there on July 12th, be there. This is the biggest endeavor CPI has ever done, and it's going to lead to even bigger things. We don't back down. We don't go away. If we were going to back down, we would have done it a long time ago. And if we were one of their plants or one of these fake anti-imperialists, they would be making it a lot easier for us. We have been facing a lot of challenges, but we continue to achieve great victories. So we need your support. Please send us a contribution. Please be there on July 12th at the Midwest Convention Center in the Chicago area. It's right near the O'Hare Airport. It's going to be awesome. We need you there. Thank you. All righty. Very, very good. So yeah, here we are. That's how it's working. So yeah, Penny has a new book. Check it out. Africa's Flame, The Rise of Ibrahim Traoré. And we are headed to Chicago. So yeah, I will probably stream tomorrow night, and the next night. And I'm preparing some mega videos for while I'm traveling, right? I got one that's going to premiere on Monday. And, the mega videos I think are great. Some people, I see comments in the chat. I'll just throw this out there. When I do a mega video, so sometimes when I'm traveling, I have really long videos. They're just compilations of stuff we've done over the years. And I put them on the channel, and I'll see people like, you expect me to watch 8 hours? No, I don't. I just gave you that ability. People need background noise, right? People need something to listen to. And it's also fun to review. Look, you don't have to watch stuff just because I posted here. You don't, and I've had people complain, Caleb, you don't have to watch, you stream every day. Do you expect me to watch this? No, I don't. I stream because I feel like streaming. And if you want to watch, great. If you don't, you don't, but yeah, I do the mega. I've already got one mega video that'll go up on Monday. I'm going to try to do a few of them while I'm away for the conference because it's important. It needs to be done. So I'm going to do a couple mega premiere videos, and yeah, we just got to build. We got to build. We just got to build. There is no alternative. We've got to build a movement. There is no alternative. There really isn't. And so thank you to everyone who's supporting CPI. Thank you to everyone who's going to be there in Chicago. Thank you to everyone who's supported us. And we're working hard, and we are winning great victories. Great victories. So, all righty, folks, we're going to put on the closing music. It's been fun. We'll be back, and we'll be back. We'll be back. We'll be back. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.